Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Pirate. After punching the redhead, I went crazy. Chapter 61. All the pirates who had evil intentions against Luang and others were completely confused and frightened after seeing this scene. They never imagined that these seemingly gentle and harmless young men could actually have such terrifying swordsmanship. Especially Luang, who was wearing a black coat, a beret, and a sharp knife, gave them an even more terrifying impact. All the pirates never thought that this ordinary, even skinny guy could kill so many pirates with one sword, and he was able to separate their heads in an instant. This kind of impact, this kind of scene, made every passing pirate, whether intentionally or unintentionally, take a breath. This sword is no less than a human head harvester. Luang naturally noticed the eyes of every pirate present. He glanced indifferently in all directions and said, "Is there anyone else who wants to come? If so, let's come together. Come one by one, it's really a waste of time." Hearing this, and looking at Luang's sword with a purple edge and a cold chill, all the pirates shuddered violently. Almost in unison, everyone pretended not to see it and moved 3 meters away from Luang's group without saying a word. It's not that they don't want to do it, it's that Luang's swordsmanship is too intimidating, terrifying. I didn't even see how his sword came out, and his head was harvested in the blink of an eye. Who would dare to attack him? Unless they are tired of living, no one wants to use their neck to test whether the knife is sharp. It seems that the effect of killing the chicken to scare the monkeys has worked, so we don't have to worry about anyone disturbing us next. Luang said calmly while putting the second-generation goûter away casually. Shanya said nothing and just gave Luang a thumbs up. The clear meaning in those clear eyes is very obvious, that is, this time, you did a great job. Although this sword killed so many people, Nami and Nami were not so frightened even though their faces turned pale because of the previous foreshadowing. Sure enough, as Luang said, after this sword attack, no pirate dared to take a step closer. Even the pirates who coveted beauty didn't even look at Nami and the two. As if they were devils, they all ran away automatically. Within 3 meters, it almost became a restricted area. After walking for more than an hour and minutes, Luang and the others finally entered the center of the town. The temperature here is obviously much colder than outside. Because the town center is built between the mountainside and the foot of the mountain. On the mountain, there is a blanket of white snow. It seems that the weather is cold all year round. Even if it is early autumn on the sea, it is still very cold here. After walking a few steps, Luang saw 2 people wearing ordinary residents' clothes approaching. The thin blonde man on the left chuckled and said, "Are you guests from the sea? I am Mr. 9, and I welcome you on behalf of Whiskey Hill Town." The blue-haired woman on the right, Zhang, has fair skin and is extremely beautiful. She said with a warm smile, "I am Miss Wednesday. We are in Whiskey Hill Town and the most hospitable town. Since you are here, let's do our best to be landlords." The moment he saw the blue-haired woman, Luang couldn't help but hold his forehead. "Do you want this exact same plot?" Seeing Luang holding his forehead, Shinolin was stunned for a moment. "Sir, what's wrong with you?" Nami also looked worried and said, "Captain, your actions could mean you have a headache or a fever, right?" Luang. Looking at Nami's serious and worried look, Luang let out a sigh of relief. If someone else said this to him, Luang would definitely complain harshly. "What's wrong with Lousy? Lousy's balls hurt and she's speechless. Okay. You just have a fever, your whole family has a fever." But when these words came from Nami's mouth, Luang was speechless. This guy obviously cares from the bottom of his heart. It would be too stupid for him to complain. Luang glanced at the girl on the right and complained silently in his heart, "Your acting skills are the worst. If you, a majestic princess of a country, do this, aren't you going to put yourself in a tiger's mouth? With your IQ, I'm really worried for your whole family." Luang, who is familiar with the plot of One Piece, naturally recognized the one on the right as Vivi, the princess of the Alabasta Empire. In order to find the true purpose of Baroque Studio, I joined it. Little did she know that her identity had long been discovered by Baroque Studio. Luang sighed and said, "Let's go. Since they are so hospitable, let's give them a face." Nami and the 3 people didn't know why. They wanted to tell Luang that these 2 people obviously looked strange. "Why do you still believe in such strange people or even follow them?" But after thinking that Luang's decisions from the beginning to the present were all correct, Nami and the other three chose to remain silent and followed Luang obediently. Wei Wei and Mr. Nine, who were standing beside him, obviously didn't expect that this group of people would believe their lies so easily, and they were stunned for a second. They looked at each other and grinned in unison. Immediately, without saying a word, he led Luang and the others towards the town with a smile. Looking at Luang's back, Shanya's eyes showed a strange look. Is there something wrong with this guy? Even a fool can see that there is something wrong with these two people. Nami and Shinolin are equally suspicious. But seeing Luang following him so happily, they couldn't leave Luang alone, so they had no choice but to shake their heads and follow them. Soon, under the leadership of Vivi and Mr. Nine, Luang and others followed them to a huge house. Outside this house, a middle-aged man wearing a yellow wig and a pony-shaped face walked out with a smile. The moment Vivi saw the man with a big face, she immediately came up to him with a smile. "Mr. Mayor, these people are guests from afar and want to take a rest here." Seeing Vivi's thoughtful eyes, the mayor immediately nodded with understanding. He coughed, then put on a very warm smile and said to Luang and others, "It turns out that we are guests from afar. We have had a hard journey. Come in quickly. I am Ika, the mayor of Whiskey Mountain Island Town. Lem, now." Speaking of this, he suddenly waved his hand and made an invitation gesture to the house inside, while saying enthusiastically, "Let us welcome you in the warmest way." With a wave of Ikaram's hand, the door of the house slowly opened. Then a group of handsome men and beauties surged out and enthusiastically pulled Luang and everyone in while singing and laughing. Soon, a passionate and enthusiastic banquet started. I have to say that the mayor's arrangements were really ruthless. At least Luang had a great time eating and playing. There are dozens or hundreds of kinds of delicacies on the entire table, including everything to eat and drink. It is simply like a paradise on earth. At this time, Luang even felt happy and reluctant to miss Shu. Because, on both sides of him were two women with particularly bulging breasts and wearing hot clothes. The two women had red lips, white teeth, slender figures, and fair skin. They had been leaning closely on Luang's left and right sides. The soft place kept pressing Luang's arms, and kept stuffing fruits and various delicacies into his mouth, making him unable to stop eating. At this moment, Luang felt like he was about to take off. Although Nami and Shinolin on the side were enjoying their meal, they looked very unhappy. The little faces of both of them were red and bulging, and they were so angry that they almost became balloons taking off. Shanya, on the other hand, kept stuffing various delicacies into his mouth with a calm face, seemingly not paying any attention to the outside world. At the same time, in the middle of the banquet, Vivi and the blonde Mr. Nine from before quietly left. They and Ikaram came to another small room and discussed in low voices. Vivi crossed her arms and said unhappily, "Mr. Mayor, are you sure you read it correctly? This guy is devouring his food like a starving man. How could he be that person?" The reason why she was so unhappy was because Vivi found that Luang had been focusing on her breasts from time to time since he first saw her. That look was no different from that of a pirate or a ruffian. If it weren't for the mayor's instructions, she would have wanted to dig out Luang's eyes. Mr. Point Nine also nodded and said, "I don't think he looks like the person in the legend. I feel that his temperament doesn't match him." Ikaram shook his head. No, I didn't just go by his appearance, but also by his companions. According to the intelligence, this guy's companions are two women and a boy with green hair. Judging from many characteristics, it must be that group of people. There is absolutely no way it can be wrong. At this moment, a burly woman wearing a red and white vest, with explosive muscles all over her body, and short pink hair opened the door and walked in. "HMPH, we should have killed them directly at the port just now. There is no need to waste so much time." Ikaram glanced at the burly woman, shook his head and said, "You underestimate him too much. He is a bounty hunter who has killed many powerful pirates such as Creek, Crow, Dragon, and Thunderfish. If you confront him openly, do you think you have a chance of winning?" After hearing the names of those notorious pirates, everyone fell silent. These pirates are nothing in the Grand Line, but to the Ms. Baroque Studio, they are like giant dragons. At least, their current combat effectiveness is far from their opponents. After seeing that everyone was speechless, Ikaram crossed his arms and said calmly, I guess they wouldn't put something as important as a debit card on the ship. There is a high probability that it is on them. So, we just need to wait for them to get drunk, wait for an opportunity to act, and then force them to reveal the password after getting the card, then the bounty he got from catching those big pirates will belong to us. Hearing this, everyone nodded excitedly. Although they were a little unhappy, they could only hold back their impulse just in case. Soon, Nami and others were so drunk that they fell down immediately. Shanya and Luang also had red faces and lay directly on the table. Hey, wake up, handsome guy. The beauties on the left and right pushed Luang, but found that he couldn't wake up no matter how he screamed. They looked at the grape juice in their hands and fell into deep thought. Can this thing make you drunk? But seeing that Luang couldn't wake up no matter how much he screamed, and even snored slightly, the two finally confirmed that Luang was really drunk. At this time, Ikaram and others happened to come down from upstairs. When they saw the four people lying drunkenly on the sofa, they looked at each other and showed meaningful smiles. Didn't you think that such a powerful person would be defeated by a meal of good food and wine? Ikaram smiled coldly and said, tie them all up for me. As you command. After everyone nodded in unison, they took out the rope and walked up towards Luang and the four of them without saying anything. But just when their rope was approaching Luang, who was already sleeping soundly and even snoring like thunder, suddenly stretched out his right hand. What? The young beauty was stunned for a moment, and the next moment she saw Luang, who was already drunk and unconscious, opened his eyes at some point. Beauty, what are you doing? Luang grinned, then grabbed the rope, pulled the beauty in front of him, and grabbed her neck. When Ikaram saw this, his face changed drastically, and he yelled, let her go, or none of you will get out of here alive. Luang pushed the beauty out without saying a word. The beauty, who regained safety, immediately ran back behind Ikaram in fear, looking at Luang with fear on her face. Everyone was also puzzled. They didn't understand why Luang suddenly threw back such a good hostage. They didn't believe that Luang would really let him go just because of Ikaram's words. That would be the stupidest behavior. I saw Luang patting second-generation Ghost on his waist, grinning and saying, as a swordsman, staying vigilant is the most basic quality. As a man, not taking women as hostages is the most basic virtue. As for you, there is no need to be too happy, because in the eyes of the giant dragon, no matter how many ants there are, they are still ants, and there is no need to use any extra thoughts and means. Hearing this, Ikaram clenched his fists in anger. You actually dare to mock us as ants. In that case, don't blame me for being ruthless. His eyes flashed with a ruthless look, and he waved his hand down without saying a word, you all kill him. As Ikaram's order fell, dozens or hundreds of men with swords surged in from the outside and attacked Luang and everyone. Luang slowly pulled out the second-generation Ghost. Looking at all the fierce-looking opponents, he slightly raised the corner of his mouth and said coldly, very good, since everyone has drawn their swords, then let's divide life and death. As the words, life and death, fell, Luang suddenly pulled out the second-generation Ghost in his hand. At the moment of extraction, the air within 100 meters around the entire house suddenly dropped by more than 10 degrees. Everyone shuddered violently, and the next second, they saw purgatory coming. Only a low moan was heard, trouble and bloodshed. Then, the whole house seemed to be shrouded in blood-colored light, and it fell apart in an instant and was shattered. Wow! Countless screams came and went in an instant. Ikaram, who was standing outside the door, didn't know why, but looked at the house in astonishment as it shattered into pieces in an instant. A moment later, he saw 4 figures standing coldly among the fallen ruins. These 4 figures are Luang, Nami, Shinolan and Xiao Shanya. And around the 4 of them were the group of subordinates who were all dead and could no longer die. Seeing the scene of corpses strewn all over the ground, Ikaram was trembling all over, and his face turned pale. How could he be so powerful? Ikaram obtained clues through various channels and knew that Luang and the 4 of them were his bounty hunters across the East China Sea. But being famous is far inferior to meeting him. Today, after witnessing this moment with his own eyes, he realized that he had seriously underestimated this strong man. Although he was outside, he didn't see how Luang took action. But from the bloody light, from the scene where the entire building was shattered and hundreds of his men were killed, we can know how terrifying Luang is. I'm afraid, even if we add myself, Vivi and 4 other people, the result will be the same. Luang glanced at the 4 people in Ikaram who were shaking like they were dancing mechanically, and slowly put away the second-generation ghost in his hand. He said calmly, I am a person who has always been clear about grudges and grudges. I must repay kindness and avenge myself. I have already avenged the revenge you just designed to frame us. As for the delicious meal you invited us, I will let it go. You can repay it with 1 horse. After finishing speaking, Luang led Nami and the other 3 people and walked slowly past the 4 people of Ikaram. At this moment, 2 cold voices suddenly came from the front and back. Do you think you are great after you kill the little fish and shrimp? Hee, you are right, they are just a bunch of useless trash. So what if you are defeated? You are nothing in front of us. As these 2 voices sounded, 2 figures with cold auras appeared on both sides of Luang's crowd. Luang casually scanned the front and back, and couldn't help but smile. The God of Destiny is really good at arranging, and there are quite a few roles that should be played. One of the 2 men was wearing sunglasses, a long windbreaker, and a man with an octopus-like hairstyle. The other is a woman wearing a dome hat, holding a sun umbrella, and wearing a yellow dress. Luang recognized these 2 people at a glance. They were both devil fruit users. One is Mr. 5, a user with explosive fruit abilities. One is Miss Valentine, a user with the ability to change her body weight freely. Luang glanced at the 2 of them, shook his head helplessly, and sighed. I actually don't hate showing off at all. Really, as long as you are strong enough and you can show off, then you are capable and really awesome, but... Having said this, he looked at the 2 of them with mocking eyes and said slowly, if you don't have the ability to show off, you are a fool, and I never like to hold back when dealing with fools. Mr. 5 pushed up his glasses and said disdainfully, I just want to see if your strength is as powerful as your mouth. While speaking, he put his right hand into his nostril, and in a speechless gesture, he suddenly dug out a booger and flicked it towards Luang and everyone else. Miss Valentine also covered her mouth and smiled. Gee, that's good, Mr. 5, let's see how much he weighs. While saying this, Miss Valentine's Day also rushed over. Funny and ignorant, Luang snorted coldly, and then instantly pulled out Gui Te. In an instant, the temperature dropped sharply again. Everyone shuddered uncontrollably. Then, everyone saw the most horrifying scene. Luang looked indifferent and suddenly waved a blood-red sword light towards the front and back sides. Blood moon. The moment a cold whisper came out of the corner of Luang's mouth, 2 screams suddenly sounded in the next second. Wow, the 2 devil fruit users who were sarcastic just a moment ago and put Luang and everyone on the spot were instantly smashed into pieces by the huge, blood-red sword light like the moon. Like a rain of flesh and blood, it slowly fell in the eyes of everyone with their hair numb and their hearts pounding. He actually killed 2 senior cadres in an instant. Ikaram and Mr. Joba were all chilled. They felt like fools just a second ago, for how dare they design such a monster. Even after knowing that this monster pretended to be drunk, he still let so many people attack him. This is really like carrying a lantern into the latrine and seeking death. Vivi, who witnessed this scene with her own eyes, was so frightened that she covered her little cherry mouth with her little hands and trembled uncontrollably. The ordinary-looking man in front of him was like a devil, killing hundreds of Baroque members with just a raise of his hands. At this moment, he continues to harvest the lives of 2 senior Baroque cadres who can fight 1 against 100. Who is he? Is he really just a pure bounty hunter? Is he a human, or a devil? Various doubts and questions kept popping up in Vivi's mind, but she couldn't find the answer she wanted. You really take ignorance for fun. Let's go, it's time to go back. Luang slowly put away Guiche, and his eyes as cold as a demon's a moment ago returned to his lazy posture again. Because this was not the first time that they saw Luang killing people, even at this moment they were frightened. Nami and the other 3 quickly recovered their surprise, nodded and followed Luang back. After being together for so long, Nami and the 3 of them all understand that although Luang looks sharp, cold and ruthless when he kills people, but many times, the people he killed were those who deserved to be killed, and there was nothing to say. Although it felt a bit cruel, it was not so uncomfortable after they figured out some things. When Luang walked about 100 meters, Vivi suddenly thought of something. She frowned and clenched and unclenched her pink fists, as if she was struggling with something. It wasn't until a few seconds passed that she suddenly opened her red lips and said directly, "Please wait a moment." Ikaram was stunned for a moment, then pulled Vivi, "Do you know what you are doing?" Vivi bit her red lips, looked at Ikaram, struggled for a few seconds, and then said, "I know, but I have no choice now, I can only ask for their help." Luang paused, then turned around and said casually, "What's wrong? You don't want to fight again, do you?" Hearing this, Vivi trembled suddenly, then held her pink fist and looked at Luang anxiously. Can I ask you to do me a favor?" Luang inadvertently glanced at the white snow on the opposite side, and then coughed twice. He knew the following words without Vivi having to tell her. She definitely hopes that she can help her find out the location, members, and their plans of the Baroque studio. Because Alabasta suffered riots, the whole country was crumbling, like a building about to collapse. If we don't find a way to solve the riot, it will be completely over. And Baroque Studio and the boss behind it are the real conspirators who caused all this. Therefore, talents such as Vivi and Ikaram will disguise their identities and join Baroque Studio. Unfortunately, their identities have long been discovered by Crocodile as Shichibukai. Luang thought for a while, then looked at the white chest, and finally his conscience defeated his reason, and he nodded resolutely. He looked solemn and majestic, and said righteously, "It doesn't matter what you say." Nami, Shinolin and Shanya all looked sideways at Luang, their eyes full of disdain. Is this guy really a serious captain? Wei Wei carefully glanced in all directions, and then said to Luang, "There are a lot of people here talking, so let's take a step to talk." Mr. Zhou Ba and the burly woman both wanted to follow, but were stopped by Ikaram. "Don't move around, just let her talk to them. I believe in the character of that bounty hunter." Mr. Zhou Ba and the burly woman were both of their own. Seeing Ikaram say this, they had no choice but to nod. What Ikaram said was not unreasonable. If Luang and the others wanted to do something to him, they would have done it long ago. It is impossible to stay until now and want to do it again on a whim. In addition, the reason why he trusted Luang was because Luang clearly had a hostage at the beginning, but he still threw the female hostage back. Based on this, Ikaram believed that Luang was definitely not the kind of person who would go back on his words. Soon, led by Vivi, everyone came to a small forest. After lighting a small fire, Vivi sat on a log. She held her arms with both hands. The woman who looked very scheming a moment ago actually looked a little thin under the firelight at this moment. Vivi glanced at Luang, bit her red lips gently, and then said, "Actually." Luang, who had been familiar with this scene for a long time, suddenly raised his hand helplessly and interrupted directly, "Actually, you are the princess of Alabasta, named Vivi. The reason why you joined Baroque Studio is to uncover the boss behind the scenes, uncover their conspiracy, and finally find a way to solve the riot, right?" Hearing that Luang actually said what he wanted to say, Wei Wei was dumbfounded. She covered her small mouth, and her clear starry eyes were as wide as a calf's. How does he know so much? Who is he? Luang was not surprised at all by this expression and eyes. He curled his lips, glanced at Vivi, and said, "Don't be surprised or afraid. If I wanted to kill you, or even attack your Alabasta kingdom, it would be effortless at all, so you don't have to have any doubts about me. Because my strength is here, there is no need to make all these twists and turns." Having said this, Luang moved his sore neck a little. He said casually, "It's okay if you want me to do this for you, but I have conditions." Hearing this, Nami and Shinolin couldn't help but look suspicious and looked at Luang with strange expressions. Those eyes full of wisdom made Luang tense up and he couldn't help but swallowed his saliva and said, "What are those eyes of yours?" Nami held her little face with her white right palm, looked at Luang meaningfully and said, "No, we just want to hear what interesting conditions the captain will propose." Luang. At this moment, Luang finally understood why these two guys looked at him with such strange eyes. Obviously, they are impure. Luang rolled his eyes at the two of them and said, "What do you think?" "My condition is 1 billion Baileys." Hearing this, everyone was stunned. Vivi felt as if she had been struck by lightning, and was instantly stunned. 1 billion Baileys. Vivi swallowed, thinking she had heard wrong. Luang nodded and said, yes, it's 1 billion Baileys. This is my reward. After all, what I want to save is not one person or two people, but your entire Alabasta. I don't have enough reward. I'm sorry, I don't have it. The habit of working for free. When Nami and the other three heard this, their eyes widened and they looked at Luang as if they had seen a ghost. Nami said, Captain, are you asking for too much? Shinolin bit his lower lip lightly and said, after all, our country is in ruins and our family is in ruins. Asking for 1 billion belly seems a bit. Shanya said nothing, just looked at Luang silently. The meaning is very simple, just do whatever you want, I don't have any objections. Luang glanced at Nami and Shinolin and sighed helplessly. These two kind-hearted children really don't know how dangerous this world is. If it were anyone else, let alone 1 billion Baileys, even 5 billion Baileys would probably not dare to accept it. The opponent is not some cat or dog, little fool, or gangster, but the famous and terrifying Shichibukai. Even if the bounty is less than 100 million, Crocodile's strength far exceeds this amount of bounty. Don't forget, Crocodile is one of the Shichibukai. How can such a terrifying existence be measured by a mere 100 million Baileys? In fact, this is already a very, very, very favorable condition for the entire Alabasta. Of course, there are some things that Luang is not suitable to say too much. He could only say to Nami and the others, you are overthinking it. If anyone else had 5 billion belly, they would not dare to take it. I can accept this order for 1 billion belly, which is already a great honor. Listening to Luang's words, Vivi gritted her teeth, her heart full of contradictions and struggles. Because Luang's words are indeed very reasonable, and this already involves the national level. It is by no means a simple matter of one or two people. If billion Baileys can be completed, it's not a loss. However, what Vivi is most worried about now is whether Luang is really capable enough to help her settle this matter. If Luang couldn't do it, wouldn't she be in vain? Luang saw Vivi's worry at a glance, and he said calmly, don't worry, I am very honest. You can give me 1 billion Baileys when the matter is completed. Hearing this sentence, Vivi was stunned for a moment, and then she looked surprised. Are you serious? Luang scratched his itchy nose and said, of course, when a man speaks, it's hard to follow his words, but... Hearing the word, but, Vivi suddenly felt her heart in her throat again. But so what? Vivi looked at Luang nervously and scared. This guy seems to have a very mysterious origin and is extremely powerful, giving people an unfathomable feeling. It's like an abyss. You only know that the abyss is unfathomable, but you never know how unfathomable it is. Luang grinned and stared at Wei Wei with cold eyes. If I complete your commission, but you don't intend to fulfill it, then the fate of those in the room will be repeated in the entire Alabasta kingdom. Quote. As soon as these words were spoken, Vivi shuddered violently, and her eyes widened to the point of disbelief. Vivi, who witnessed with her own eyes how Luang killed hundreds of people and how he killed 2 senior Baroque cadres with 2 swords, had no doubt about the threat in Luang's words. If you really dare to break your promise, then the next moment, the whole of Alabasta will probably usher in a more terrifying and devastating disaster. Vivi suppressed the fear and shock in her heart, and after about 10 seconds, she gritted her teeth and said, I promise you. After getting the answer he wanted, Luang nodded with satisfaction. Okay, then get ready and come on board with us. After reaching an agreement, Luang and Vivi returned to their previous positions. Vivi whispered something in Ikarim's ear. After a moment, Ikarim's eyes stared like a cow. But after thinking about Luang's power, he had to grit his teeth and choose to take a gamble. Like this country, he has no retreat. Anyway, it's all doomed, so it's better to treat a dead horse as a living horse doctor and directly entrust Luang to give it a try. If they lose, and they have nothing to lose. But if a miracle happens and it is truly successful, it will still be worth it even if Luang is given 1 billion Baileys as a reward. Because Luang succeeded, he saved not just a few people, but thousands of lives across the entire country. For Alabasta, this is far beyond what 1 billion Baileys can measure. Vivi, come with me first. Ikarim thought of something and quickly called Vivi nearby. After a while, Vivi walked back quickly with a trace of tears. Ikaram said to Vivi, let's go, let's go. Vivi turned back 3 times with each step, holding a pointer in her hand, her eyes filled with reluctance and worry. Soon, she followed Luang and others back to their exclusive ship. After Luang returned to the boat, he straightened his face and said expressionlessly, wipe away your tears. I don't like to see women crying in front of me. Hearing these words, looking at Luang's ferocious eyes, and thinking of the scene where Luang killed hundreds of people with a sword not long ago, Vivi immediately covered her mouth, not daring to let out another sob. She knew that the man in front of her could really kill people. Moreover, he kills without batting an eye. Why are you so cruel to girls? Nami rolled her eyes at Luang, then walked over and comforted Vivi softly. Shinolin also came to Vivi and told her in a soft voice that Luang just looked fierce, but he was actually very kind to his own people. But after being comforted for a long time, it only made Vivi put away a little bit of her fear and anxiety. Her eyes when looking at Luang occasionally showed a different kind of trembling. The experience this night was really scary. There were over 100 people, all lying on the ground with their heads, legs, and hands cut off. Some people were even bloody and turned into pieces. Although I didn't see with my own eyes how Luang took action, we can think of how ferocious, evil, and terrifying his swordsmanship is through these stumps and broken arms. Vivi knows that Luang is very powerful, but equally, this also shows how terrifying he is. She felt that it was better for her to be cautious, even if the two of them had already reached an agreement. After all, she didn't understand Luang. If at any time, that sentence or thing he did didn't go with the other person's wishes, and he was cut off with a knife, then it would be over. Luang didn't care at all about Vivi's thoughts and ideas. The reason why he agreed to Vivi was naturally not just for the 1 billion belly, he was more curious about Alabasta, a kingdom in the desert. After all, he has always lived inland with beautiful mountains and rivers. Now that he finally had the opportunity to come to this exotic country, he naturally wanted to visit it. As for the messy Shichibukai, it is nothing to him with the combat power of 4 emperors. Anyway, they are all things that can be solved easily without spending much effort. While sightseeing, you can also get 1 billion belly. Where can you find such a good thing? Of course, it is impossible for Luang to be confused and explain these words to Vivi, Nami and others. After picking up Vivi on the boat, Luang and others did not leave immediately, but stayed on the boat. After all, the mast is broken, and it must be replaced by workers at the dock before it can continue sailing, otherwise it will be too dangerous. Money can make a fool of himself, and after Luang paid 3 times the price, the shipyard workers braved the cold wind and replaced the mast overnight. A few hours later, their big ship set off smoothly again. On the deck, Nami was slightly startled when she took the record pointer handed over by Vivi. Nami, this is... Vivi rolled up a few messy hair, with a faint smile on her face as white as jade and delicate as a fairy. This is my country, the record pointer of the Alabasta kingdom. As long as we follow this pointer, we will able to reach Alabasta. Nami's eyes lit up after hearing this. This is great, so we don't have to take detours. Because the voyage diaries Nami had read were scattered, many things needed to be pieced together by herself. This kind of navigation map is completely based on half exploration. It is still easy to get lost in the sea if you are not careful, but it is different with a deterministic record pointer. This thing is equivalent to a navigator. As long as you follow the navigation, you will reach your destination sooner or later. Moreover, this is still a straight route, there is no possibility of any detours. Vivi is an extremely elegant woman, probably because she was born into a royal noble. Her behavior is extremely delicate and gentle. From the moment she boarded the ship, she became a different person, completely no longer as scheming as when she first encountered her. This made Luang very uncomfortable. Is this guy afraid of me or being in the shadow? Why does he tremble all over and turn pale when I look at him sometimes? Luang was speechless, but did not take any additional action. Anyway, just send this thing to Alabasta and kill Shichibukai's sand crocodile. As for this princess with the same turbulent breasts, he could just take a look at it, and he didn't want to worry too much about the rest. Unlike Luffy and other protagonists, Luang is not in the mood to casually accept someone as his partner. His vision is large, but his mind is small. Only the people you identify are worthy of your own protection. No matter how beautiful someone is, Luang will still look down on him. For example, this princess in front of me. Although she is quite courageous and somewhat clever, she is not Luang's type. In addition, if she comes to the ship, she will not be able to provide any real valuable help. It is impossible for Luang to want such a person. As for how Nami and the three of them want to get along with them, that's their business. Luang is not in the mood and doesn't have the time to care so much. Another beautiful day with beautiful weather. After enjoying the delicious lunch, Luang took the book again and lay comfortably on the deck chair to continue to pass the time. The sun seems to be brighter today than in the past, and the wind blowing from the sea in the afternoon is actually a bit soft and warm. It's as if a woman's little hands are gently stroking him, and the tingling feeling makes people feel comfortable and want to sleep. The lazy Luang had only been reading for less than half an hour before he couldn't bear the gentle caress. Drowsiness soon came like a tidal wave, and Luang's eyelids slowly closed, and he fell into the most comfortable dreamland in an instant. In his dream, he found himself in an extremely colorful Madara jungle with thousands of flowers. Here, there are countless fairies wearing rainbow fairy skirts dancing around. Each of these fairies is charming, with white skin, beautiful appearance, graceful figure, and extremely sweet smile. The most important thing is that these fairies are dancing back and forth around Luang. From time to time, she would even reach out her hand and pull him to join in the beautiful, artistic and aesthetic dance. Looking at the turbulent scenes, Luang grinned and felt like he was about to take off. Halfway through takeoff, one of the fairies suddenly reached out and pinched Luang's face and kept shouting, "Hey, sir, wake up quickly." Luang looked at this with a confused expression. "Why are you pinching me?" Luang, who was in some pain from being pinched, finally woke up from being pinched forcefully. He opened his eyes suddenly, and then saw three beautiful faces looking at him in confusion. These three people are naturally Nami, Shinolin and Vivi. At this time, Shinolin was pinching Luang's face. After seeing Luang open his eyes, he smiled and quickly retracted. "Sir, are you awake?" Luang touched his aching left cheek and glanced at Shinolin with a speechless expression. It turned out that it was this guy who pinched me. No wonder why I saw that fairy in a pink skirt calling me husband in my dream. Luang rolled his eyes at Shinolin and said, "Why are you pinching me?" "I'm sleeping soundly." At this moment, Nami couldn't help but covered her little mouth and smiled. "It's not because you slept so hard, Captain. Dinner was already prepared, but you were still sleeping. We were all very hungry, so we had to wake you up. Get up." Shinolin and Vivi nodded and quickly testified for Nami. "Then just scream. Why are you pinching me? It hurts." Luang glared at Shinolin helplessly, and then slowly climbed up from the chair. Shinolin nodded and said, "Yes, sir, we have called you many, many times, but you kept smiling stupidly. In the end, there was really nothing I could do, so I thought of using this method to wake you up." At this time, bursts of gurgling sounds also sounded from Luang's belly. Obviously, his 5 internal organs are telling him that it's time to eat. Luang glanced at the three of them angrily, then shook his head and walked towards the cabin without saying a word. Vivi held her pink fist, gently bit her beautiful red lips and said to Nami and the two of them, He shouldn't be angry, right?" Nami waved his hand and said, "It's okay, don't think it's scary when the captain kills people, but in fact he does this to bad people. He is very kind to his own people, just like an elder." "Hey, why, let me tell you." Shinolin smiled and said, "Anyway, when you are around him, you never have to worry about being bullied. You can always trust his strength. He is like a majestic mountain, which can always make people trust, relax and make people feel comfortable. People feel the most reliable peace of mind." Hearing this, Vivi couldn't help but become curious about Luang. Strong, greedy for money and protective of shortcomings. Not only had she seen such a person, she had never even heard of him. It's like a magical vortex. It's okay if you don't look at it, but the more you look at it, the deeper it sinks. Vivi didn't know that while she was curious, a mysterious emotion appeared in her heart unconsciously. "This is a really nice ship." At this moment, a pleasant and somewhat female voice suddenly sounded on the boat. Following this voice, Nami and the other three looked up and suddenly looked shocked. because they saw a long-haired woman wearing a purple round hat, a double-breasted leather jacket, and a white short skirt. At this time, she was holding her cheek in one hand while sitting on the railing of the observatory with great interest. A pair of snow-white and delicate long legs fell straight down, looking particularly eye-catching. Nami looked wary and said, "Who are you? Why did you appear on our ship?" Shinolin also looked wary. Just when he was about to say something, Vivi on the side opened her eyes in fear and said, "Miss All Sunday." The woman in purple sighed and said, "Hey, you run so fast, I almost couldn't catch up, Miss Wednesday." Shinolin looked at Vivi in confusion and asked, "Who is she?" Vivi. Vivi's teeth trembled as she spoke. "She is Mr. O's partner, and the only one who knows the boss behind Baroque Studio, codenamed Miss All Sunday. We have been following her, and then we found out that the boss behind the scenes is Shichibukai Rockdale." The woman in purple said with a mysterious smile, "The correct way to say it is that I took the initiative to let you follow." Shinolin said, "So she is a good person." Vivi shook her head, looked at the woman in purple angrily and said, "Stop talking nonsense, I've known about this for a long time, and I want to know now, what exactly did you do to Ikaram and the others? You should aren't you going to kill them all?" The woman in purple smiled and said nothing, but looked at Vivi with a meaningful expression and said, "So, you entrusted the owner of this ship to find the boss for you and quell the unrest in this country." After hearing this, Vivi finally couldn't restrain her sadness and burst into tears. Obviously, Ikaram and others have been poisoned. Nami gritted his teeth, and while protecting Vivi by his side, he looked at the woman in purple angrily, "You are such a fool." The woman in purple smiled and said, "Don't say that, I'm not here to deal with you." Before the woman in purple could continue to speak, a voice interrupted her. "Nicole Robin, if I remember correctly, this should be her full name." What? Robin couldn't help but be shocked when he heard this strange voice call out his full name in one breath. The next second, a man wearing a black cloak and a thin face came to her. Of course he is Luang. Almost the moment Robin appeared, Luang had already sensed it with his arrogance. The reason why he didn't come up immediately was because he was releasing his happiness in the bathroom. After the release, he hurriedly walked up. After realizing that the person coming was Robin, Luang relaxed slightly. Luang is very familiar with this plot. Robin came here not to deal with them, but to give him a recording compass and see what they were like. In other words, it's just curiosity. But Robin never expected that there was a super being on this ship that she could never see through. This man is Luang in front of him. Having already thoroughly understood the plot of One Piece, he naturally knows more than Robin, and was even able to call Robin by name when they first met. Robin looked at Luang warily. Why do you know my name?" Looking at the long, snow-white legs dangling in front of him, looking at that beautiful face and that graceful figure, Luang couldn't help shouting crazily in his heart, "Monster, this figure is too monster." At such an upright and vigorous age, how could Luang withstand such temptation? He gritted his teeth and forcibly averted his eyes. "I know everything. In addition to your name, I also know that you are a flower devil fruit user. Moreover, you can also read ancient texts, and even..." Luang looked at Robin, who stood up slowly and was shocked and even trembling slightly. He grinned and said, "I know you are helping Crickdale find an ancient weapon. How about it? Do you need me to tell you more?" Robin bit her red lips lightly and looked at Luang in disbelief. How could this man understand me so thoroughly? This is impossible. There is no one in this world who can understand me and understand so much. Except for that Marine General, but he will never reveal my secret. If he wanted to deal with himself, he wouldn't have let him go so easily. Robin was trembling all over. It was a kind of fear and fear of the unknown. "Humph, so what if you know, as long as you die, you will be nothing?" Robin gritted his teeth and suddenly a chill appeared in his eyes. I saw her folding her hands, closing her beautiful eyes, and preparing to use her devil fruit ability on Luang. Ah! At this moment, a sneer suddenly sounded in the air. The next second, Robin felt a slight chill on his neck. "Don't move at the end, otherwise I don't know if my knife will accidentally scratch it in the next second." Robin's expression froze and he opened his eyes suddenly. Then, she saw a long knife with a purple edge falling on her neck at some point. But Lu Wang, this seemingly ordinary man, had already appeared behind him, staring at him with a cold face. Feeling the cold murderous intent coming from the knife, and feeling the sudden drop in temperature, Robin found himself shivering uncontrollably. Who is this man? Why does he have such terrible murderous intent? And, why does his sword give me such a terrifying sense of oppression? Robin panicked inside, because she found that she actually felt a much more intimidating power from Lu Wang than Crocodile. Although she had not fought, she was sure that she was no match for the man in front of her. In fact, she can be very sure that even if she is allowed to take action first, she may not be able to do anything to this man. Robin was sweating violently, gritted his teeth, and suddenly sneered, "Ha, is this the character of a swordsman to attack a weak woman?" Lu Wang looked at the woman in front of him with an indifferent expression. Although he had to admit that Robin was also a top-notch beauty, to him, this was not important at all. Because he doesn't like women who are too scheming. Even if the beauty in front of him is cleared up later in the plot of One Piece, it still won't change his impression of Robin. Lu Wang sneered and said, "Don't be ridiculous. If you are a weak woman, then there is no such thing as a strong person in this world. Robin, the flower fruit capable person, if I remember correctly, your current bounty seems to be 719 million Baileys. This bounty is enough to make quite a few pirates surrender." After hearing the bounty, Nami and Shinolin couldn't help but cover their mouths in fear, with expressions of disbelief on their faces. Vivi also gritted her teeth and looked extremely fearful. Robin bit his red lips, never expecting that the man in front of him understood him so thoroughly. She sighed, and without saying a word, she took out a record pointer from her pocket and threw it to Lu Wang. "This is the record pointer to the small garden, and it is also the only way for your route. I am here to tell you, Alabasta, you don't want to go back." After saying these words, Robin jumped down suddenly as if he was running away, and then he jumped over again and jumped directly onto a large turtle that swam over at an unknown time. This big turtle also has a very comfortable seat placed on it. It is obviously a mount that Robin has arranged long ago. "I wish you a safe journey." Robin looked at Lu Wang deeply, and then urged his mount to leave quickly. Seeing Robin arriving inexplicably and leaving in a hurry, Nami and the three of them looked surprised. At this time, Nami suddenly glanced at the record pointer in Lu Wang's hand and said, "Captain, are you sure you want to go to that small garden?" Lu Wang knew the arrangement of the God of Destiny. Although he felt a little speechless, he was not Luffy after all. He was already here, so he just went to take a look. "If I remember correctly, you can see the legendary giants there." Thinking of the two huge giants he saw in the anime, Lu Wang couldn't help but smile. After finally traveling to the world of One Piece, wouldn't it be a waste of this rare opportunity if we didn't walk around and finish playing? After thinking briefly, Lu Wang said, "Go ahead and use this record pointer to navigate." As he spoke, Lu Wang jumped down and handed the record pointer he just got from Robin into Nami's hand. "I'll leave this to you, I'm going to eat." After handing it to Nami, Lu Wang turned around and walked towards the cabin without thinking. In order to deal with Robin, his belly felt aggrieved for another 10 minutes, and he had to eat quickly to comfort him. Although everyone in Nami felt very baffled by Robin's words, they were even very wary. But after Lu Wang said this, they naturally had nothing to say and just did as they were told. Anyway, no matter what happens, the powerful captain will take care of it in the end, so there is nothing to worry about. Thinking of Lu Wang's always being powerful and invincible, everyone sailed along with great peace of mind. During this period, out of boredom, Vivi, who saw Nami and the others training, had a sudden idea and wanted to join in. After hearing this bold idea, both Nami and Shinolin couldn't help but smile. The two of them casually gave Vivi a 10-pound barbell without saying a word. As a result, the beautiful princess with delicate skin and tender flesh immediately screamed from the weight. She immediately said she couldn't bear it and immediately let go of the barbell. "Come down." Seeing this scene, Nami and Shinolin both laughed. Then they explained to Vivi, who was relieved when she understood what was going on. It turns out that they had to go through a long period of training to reach this level, and they thought things were too simple. After that, Vivi didn't have the nerve to continue trying, but stood aside and watched the sea. Until she got tired of seeing the sea, she wandered around boredly. Vivi wandered back and forth all day, walking in front of Luang almost 20 times, and finally Luang couldn't stand it anymore. Because this guy is no better than Nami and the other two, and he is also at the level of waves. Walking back and forth like this would cause shaking shocks from time to time, which made him, who was full of integrity, break his defense many times and unable to concentrate on reading. Finally, Luang had to interrupt and said, "Please don't wander around in front of me. This will prevent me from concentrating on reading. Thank you for your cooperation." Vivi. She didn't expect Luang to be so stingy. He just took a few steps like this and had objections. But before she had time to get angry, she remembered the terrifying moment of being dominated by Luang, and in an instant, all the little juju in her heart disappeared. "Humph, if you don't want to leave, you won't leave. What's the big deal?" Vivi secretly scolded Luang, then turned and walked towards the cabin. Not long after, she took out a blue fishing rod from the utility store, found a seat and began to enjoy the joy of sea fishing. Luang didn't care much about this. As long as this guy doesn't continue to walk around in front of you with that big breast thing. Just like the previous plot, after walking for about half a month, the next boat arrived near an island that looked like a virgin forest. But this place is completely different from the small garden that Robin said. It is not only huge and boundless, but also not beautiful. In addition, the atmosphere here seems to be very unusual. Before the boat even docked, I saw a saber-toothed tiger that had been half bitten by an unknown monster, leaving only half of its body on the shore. Seeing this scene, Nami and the other three were so frightened that their faces turned pale and their whole bodies trembled before they even had time to go ashore. Nami swallowed, and held Shinolan's arms with some fear and said, why don't we just go up there?" Shinolan also said with frightened eyes, "I also feel like it's not very safe here." Vivi frowned and nodded. "It's indeed a bit weird." Shanya raised his eyebrows slightly, glanced at Luang, and said, "Are you sure you want to go up?" Luang glanced at everyone, then grinned, "Of course, we're here, wouldn't it be a pity not to go up and have fun?" Hearing this, Nami and the other three looked at each other in shock, their heads already drooping. Obviously, the three of them didn't want to go in at all. Shanya glanced at the three of them and said, "I suggest you come with us. This seems to be a virgin forest. If you stay on the boat, it may not be very safe. As far as I know, many snakes are very like to swim on the boat. If you encounter a small snake, it will be fine. If it is a large snake, it will be dangerous for the three of you." Hearing Shanya's words, Nami and the other two people instantly felt chills running down their spines, and felt a sudden tremor. Snakes, that's what girls are most afraid of. Thinking of the possibility of facing a terrifying giant snake on the boat, the three of them gritted their teeth and decided to follow the two of them off the boat. Although this primeval forest is definitely very unusual and even very dangerous, Luang is still protecting it. No matter what kind of crisis we encounter, there should be no problem. Nami glanced at the two of them, then gritted his teeth and nodded. "Then, let's get off the boat too." After hearing Nami's words and seeing the three people nodding at the same time, Luang couldn't help but want to give Shanya a thumbs up. This little guy understands people's hearts quite well. With just one simple sentence, he managed to defeat three women immediately. After walking along the current for a while, Nami found a relatively flat spot and stopped the boat. After anchoring, the group disembarked one after another. After getting off the boat, Nami and the other three followed Luang closely, almost following him every step of the way. After walking into this primeval forest, everyone soon heard the roars of wild beasts coming from the forest. The sound was like a lion or a tiger. It sounded particularly scary and terrifying. Nami looked around and hugged Shinolan's arms tightly, her nerves almost stretched to the extreme. Vivi also looked nervous, holding Shinolan's other arm tightly, and she was terrified. Obviously, even with Luang covering them, they would still feel extremely worried and scared. Shanya held his head with both hands and walked beside Luang calmly. Before the special training, he could easily kick a lion or a tiger to death. After the special training, his strength has increased several times. Now, let alone a tiger, even an elephant can be easily kicked away. At this time, Shanya suddenly thought of something and couldn't help but said, "Oh, by the way, Captain, I forgot to tell you. The food on our ship can only last for half a month at most. I suggest it is best to replenish our food here. Reserve food, otherwise we may not be able to hold on to that alabasta, and we will starve to death on the road. Lu Wang turned his head and looked at Shan Ya. Oh. Is there only half a month left? Shan Ya glanced sideways at Lu Wang. What do you think? You are the one who eats the most on the whole boat. If I make more for 3 people every time, can you be full? Lu Wang. At this moment, Lu Wang suddenly wanted to beat Shan Ya again. What's going on with this little brat? Don't you know how to speak tactfully? What does it mean to make an extra portion for 3 people? What is called a normal amount of food? Is it good to eat a normal amount of food? Just when Lu Wang kept slandering Shan Ya, his expression suddenly changed slightly. Something is coming. Hearing Lu Wang suddenly say this, Nami's whole face changed. Ah, what, Captain, don't scare me. After hearing this, Shinolin and Vivi were so frightened that they immediately hugged her. Almost as soon as the 3 of them hugged each other, a ferocious gray wolf rushed toward everyone with a ferocious look. The moment he saw the wild wolf, Shanya rushed forward without saying a word and kicked the wild wolf far away. Accompanying the sound of howling wolves, the wild wolf soon disappeared from everyone's eyes. But they never thought that this wild wolf was just a small beginning. Almost at the moment when the wild wolf was killed, another more ferocious black tiger rushed over from behind. It turned out to be a wolf being chased by a tiger. Shanya sneered and then rushed forward again. Soon, under Shan Yati's 2 flying kicks, the big black-haired tiger was kicked straight into a big tree, and was lying on the ground dying in the blink of an eye. The king of beasts is nothing more than that. Shanya smiled disdainfully, and then prepared to walk towards the tiger to deal with the prey. In Shanya's eyes, there is almost nothing in this world that cannot be used as food. The tiger looks very vicious, but there are still many parts of its body that can be made into extremely delicious dishes. Our ship is already running out of food, so I can only apologize. Shanya said this to the tiger calmly, then clenched his fist and punched the tiger hard. At this moment, Lu Wang suddenly raised his eyebrows slightly and shouted, Shanya, squat down. Although he didn't know what was going on, Shanya squatted down immediately out of trust in Lu Wang. And almost as soon as he squatted down, a huge snake head rushed down from the tree and bit hard at Shanya's position. The giant snake jumped into the air and rushed towards Lu Wang in the blink of an eye. Ah, Lu Wang smiled coldly, without even moving his hands, he just stared slightly. Conqueror's domineering power explodes in an instant. The blood-red giant snake came half a meter in front of Lu Wang and suddenly his eyes turned white. Then his body softened and he fell directly from the tree. Everyone was dumbfounded when they saw the body that was more than 20 meters long and half a meter wide suddenly falling from the towering tree in front of them. Nami and the 3 of them almost felt like they were suffocating. Isn't this snake too big? It would take an adult to swallow it in one mouthful, and it would barely fit between the teeth. Given the size of this giant snake, it probably wouldn't take much effort to swallow the 3 of them. At this moment, Nami, Shinolin and Vivi were so frightened that their feet almost went weak. What the hell is this place? It's either a wolf, a tiger, or a big snake. It's simply a monster's lair. Looking at the giant snake lying on the ground, Shanya also showed a lingering fear in his eyes. Although his legs and feet are very powerful, his physical body is far from the so-called indestructible state. If Lu Wang hadn't taken action just now, I'm afraid he would have been swallowed by the snake by now. Lu Wang said, "Put this tiger and giant snake on your back, we will deal with it later." Shanya said nothing and nodded silently. Although Lu Wang left this hard work to him, it was not an insult to him. Because Lu Wang is not only the captain, but also the force responsible for the entire ship. On this island, without Lu Wang opening the way, even he would never be able to get far. Because, Shanya had a vague feeling that there was definitely more than just tigers, wolves, and giant snakes here. It is very possible that there are existences that are several times more terrifying than these 2 things. This can be seen from the tiger with half its body that we saw not long ago before we came ashore. As people continued to go deeper, the entire primeval forest seemed to become quiet again. Not to mention the roars of wild beasts, even the calls of birds have become extremely rare and can't even be heard. It's like this is some kind of silent area. The silence is surprising, weird, suspicious, guilty, scary and depressing. Something's wrong. At this moment, Luang suddenly said this. The three of Nami looked at each other and remained motionless. Shanya also hugged the two big guys and followed closely beside Luang. Suddenly, a rush of rushing sounds came from far and near. Luang, you all retreat behind me, someone is coming. After hearing Luang's words, everyone immediately stood behind him, not daring to move. Then, in the eyes of everyone, a sharp giant purple cheetah ran towards them with extremely fast steps. Looking at those sharp teeth and ferocious eyes, Nami and the other two trembled in fear. This guy is actually several times bigger than the big tiger just now. It's just like a big running bear, it looks very scary. But Luang was not affected at all. He directly pulled out Guiche and struck out with a bloody slash in an instant. Blood moon. I saw the blood-red sword light bursting out of the sky like a blood-red moon, splitting the purple cheetah in two from the middle with extremely fast and sharp momentum, and cut it into two pieces in an instant. When he saw the purple cheetah split into two in the blink of an eye, he looked at the flesh and blood splattering everywhere. Nami and the other three couldn't bear it at all, so they closed their eyes directly. Shanya, who often handles food, didn't feel anything. He was just more interested in Luang's swordsmanship. He has also seen many powerful swordsmen, but he found that after comparing those swordsmen with Luang, they seemed to be extremely weak and mediocre. What level has this guy's swordsmanship reached? Why every time I watch it, I feel more and more that he is unfathomable and infinitely powerful. Shanya took a deep look at Luang, his eyes full of awe. If he hadn't gotten to know Luang's character gradually after getting along with him for a long time, he would never dare to make fun of him easily. Because Luang's strength is really terrifying, too terrifying. Using 4 words beyond imagination to describe Luang feels a bit weak. Just when everyone breathed a sigh of relief, Luang's voice sounded again. Don't move, there is a bigger guy. Upon hearing this, Nami and the other three's eyes widened instantly, as if they had seen a ghost. This purple cheetah is already grown like this, is there anything scarier than it? Oh my god, what on earth is this place? Could it be that we have arrived at the legendary monster paradise? Before Nami and the three of them could think about it, a deafening sound came from the front. In less than 5 seconds, a giant red lion, no less than 5 times larger than the purple cheetah, roared and charged at us. The giant red lion, covered in blood red, has extremely huge eyes, like 2 hanging red lanterns, blooming with an extremely crazy bloodthirsty color. In addition, the muscles all over its body exploded, and countless hard muscle lines could be seen with the naked eye flowing through every extremely strong part of the body. Just one thigh is as tall as 5 or 6 meters, just like a prehistoric creature. Nami's eyes widened instantly when she saw the red lion that was no less than 10 meters tall and as huge as a hill. Her eyes were straight, her lips were white, and she almost fainted. Shinolin and Vivi were also chilled and trembling to the point of trembling. Because they never thought that there would be such terrifying and huge animals in this world. This is land, not ocean. It's okay to see Poseidons in the sea. Why do we see such terrifying monsters here? The three of them almost cried. Blood moon. With a calm whisper, a blood-red sword light that was hundreds of meters in size cut the three people's fears in two in an instant. Before the huge red lion could get within 10 meters of Luang and the others, it was split into 2 pieces from the giant mane-covered head to the body. A large amount of blood also flowed from the 2 separated parts of the body. It flowed out quickly. Seeing this huge corpse, the hearts of the 3 women were still beating wildly. Even if one knows that Luang can handle it, the heart palpitations and despair of facing the monster still make people feel fear and weakness. It should be over, right? At this moment, Vivi suddenly said this timidly. Unexpectedly, Luang glanced at her, and then said words that made the 3 of them tremble with fear. There's a bigger guy in the back. Shanya frowned slightly. He glanced at Luang and said, Captain, are you serious or are you joking? In his opinion, this red lion should be the largest land creature he has seen so far. It would be very difficult to find someone bigger than this. Unless dinosaurs from ancient times appear, it will be absolutely difficult to find anything bigger than this red lion. Therefore, based on the accumulation of past experience, Shanya would say such a sentence. Because he knows Luang so well, this guy sometimes likes to tease the big guy. This has happened more than once or twice. But he never thought that Luang was not joking this time, but responded directly without hesitation and without any concealment, within 10 meters. Shanya. What? As if to confirm Shanya's inner conjecture, almost 10 seconds after Luang finished speaking, a huge brown monster stepped on frightening steps, with a huge body like a mountain, and went crazy towards Luang and everyone. Come running. Dinosaur. The moment they saw this huge creature, Nami and others all said a word that was unbelievable and unimaginable to them. This is a Tyrannosaurus rex. It is no less than 30 meters tall, with a strong body and well-developed muscles. A mouth of terrifying fangs as sharp as a shark, neatly arranged in a 5-meter-long bloody mouth. Those huge yellow eyes reveal the most ruthless, cruel and murderous look among carnivorous creatures. The distance of a full 100 meters, under the crazy running of the Tyrannosaurus rex, actually took less than 3 seconds. But at the third second, a blood-red arc moon that was several times more terrifying than the Tyrannosaurus rex and was much larger suddenly swept out. In an extremely brief moment, it suddenly flashed past the Tyrannosaurus rex's head and in the middle of its body. The next second, the Tyrannosaurus rex's body suddenly stopped. Immediately, the giant body suddenly flew out from the left and right sides. With a crazy splash of blood-red liquid, the body that was big enough to make people suffocate and terrifying enough to make people tremble finally split into two at this moment and died completely. After seeing the Tyrannosaurus rex being killed by Luang with a single blow, Nami staggered as she looked at the terrifying body falling to the ground, and suddenly felt a little weak in her feet. If it weren't for Shinolan's support, she would have probably sat down. At this time, Shanya suddenly raised his eyebrows, glanced at Luang with disgust, and said, "Next time, can you just chop off the head, so that it will be difficult for me to handle the ingredients?" Exclamation mark. Ah, Luang glanced at Shanya with doubts on his face. "I cut this in half for you. Wouldn't it be more convenient for you to deal with the internal organs?" Shanya glanced at Luang with disdain and said, "What are you thinking? How can I carry it like this? It's already a bit difficult for me to carry this tiger and snake. If you cut this thing in half, I will have to run several more times. It's very annoying, do you know?" Luang. Ahem, okay, I understand what you mean, just behead him next time. Nami, Shinolan, Vivi. At this moment, the three of them were really about to faint. How long has it been? These two people are still thinking about ingredients and food. Is this captain reliable? Can't you clarify the situation first? This is a primeval forest now. This is a primeval forest where all kinds of scary monsters live, rather than a holiday resort. Can you be a little more serious? Luang simply ignored Nami and the other three's crazy eye rolls. He lightly slashed his shoulder with the ghost blade and said, "Take it easy, there is a more terrifying guy coming." Hearing this, Nami and the other three were stunned for a moment, and then started to tremble again. Is there anything scarier than that Tyrannosaurus rex? Oh my god, what kind of terrifying creatures exist here? I want to go back to the boat, I don't want to stay any longer. The three women almost wanted to hug each other and cry. If I had known it, they wouldn't have followed him out. Even if you are stuck in the cabin, it is at least 100 times better than this place full of scary creatures. From now on, there is never a moment of peace and quiet. Every 2 steps, a monster attacks. Every 2 steps, a more terrifying creature appears. This is simply a paradise for monsters, no place for people to come. It's a pity that now even if you want to go back, you can't. In this primitive forest full of dangers and monsters, without Luang's protection, the three of them would definitely be unable to move forward. They had no choice but to follow Luang and continue moving forward. Be careful, the big guy is coming. As Luang finished speaking, a deafening sound of footsteps suddenly approached quickly from a distance. Every step shakes the heaven and earth, every step shakes the mountains, as if the peerless devil has descended, and every step carries a terrifying power that shakes the heaven and the earth. Nami held Shinolan's left arm with both hands, and the corners of his mouth kept trembling. What kind of monster is coming again? Shinolan was also trembling all over, shaking his head all the time. No. I don't know, it's too scary here. Vivi kept biting her lower lip again and again, and her whole body was so frightened that her blood turned pale. At this time, Shanya no longer had the previous calmness and composure, but instead had an extremely solemn look on his face. Because he also felt how terrifying the creature with the footsteps was. Judging from the fact that just walking can cause earthquake-like vibrations, this creature must be at least 100 meters tall. He had never even imagined such a prehistoric creature. With an expression that is both curious and apprehensive, both worried and solemn, Shanya stared with his big eyes, hoping to catch a glimpse of this prehistoric creature for the first time. The reaction of these people was completely different. Although Luang had goosh in his hand and did not insert the sword into the scabbard, his demeanor was more relaxed than the monsters he had encountered before. The reason for this is because he has already noticed the identity of this unknown monster through his knowledge and experience. Almost 3 seconds later, in front of everyone's gaze, a terrifying super monster that nearly covered the sky and sun finally appeared. A pair of thighs tens of meters high, a giant body dressed in unknown animal skins, and a huge humanoid head wearing a helmet. Giant. A legendary word suddenly spat out in the mouths of Nami and the others. The next second, the three of them opened their mouths slightly and rolled their eyes. Their nerves were stretched to the extreme. At this moment, they were so frightened that they fainted completely and fell down one after another. Shanya reacted quickly and rushed to help the three of them immediately. Luang. Why? Seeing the performance of the three people, Luang was also very helpless. Aren't they just giants? There's nothing to be afraid of. Ha ha ha, you actually killed the Tyrannosaurus Rex, it's really amazing, ha 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 ha. With a burst of earth-shaking laughter, the giant actually gave Luang and others a thumbs up. Obviously, he did not expect that the Tyrannosaurus Rex he just chased would be intercepted and killed on the way. Because the Tyrannosaurus Rex was the prey he had found, and he was about to kill it to roast and eat, but he didn't expect that it would be chopped down by several humans within a few steps of chasing it. This was really beyond his expectation. Not long after, Luang and the giant sat face to face in a clearing in the forest, roasting dinosaur meat together and chatting happily. The giant's name is Dongli. He is a warrior of the giant tribe. Luang was still somewhat impressed by this person. This guy and another giant named Brigi are both from the legendary giant pirates. Among them, Dongli's nickname is Blue Ogre, and Brigi's nickname is Red Ghost. They are both giant warriors with extremely powerful combat capabilities. Due to various reasons, these two people have lived on this island for more than 100 years. During this process, the two of them kept fighting, and now they have even forgotten the reason. Of course, Luang didn't bother to describe these things to Nami and others. Anyway, just understand it yourself. If you talk too much, these guys will definitely feel that they are too scary and know everything. Maybe one day these people will suddenly open their minds and regard themselves as omniscient and omnipotent gods. That would not be fun. After all, he just wants to be happy and enjoy a journey in a relaxed and comfortable way. He doesn't want to touch too many people and things that may affect his mood. Ha ha ha, it turns out it was you who did it. You are so awesome. Dong Li slapped his thighs crazily and praised Luang unstintingly. I don't know how long I have lived here, and I haven't seen the human race for a long, long time. I didn't expect that the first human race I saw would be you, and you are so powerful. At this time, Nami and the three of them had already woken up. When they first woke up, they were scared to death when they saw Dongli. But after seeing that this big guy was not hostile, and instead enthusiastically invited everyone in Nami to taste the wine he brewed himself, the three of them relaxed a little. Nami glanced at the fine wine held in a nutshell in his hand, then suddenly raised his beautiful head and looked at Dongli. Then uncle, don't you feel lonely here? Ha ha ha, are you lonely? I haven't heard this word for a long, long time. I'm here, well, I won't be lonely, because I have a good opponent, ha 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 ha. Dong Li opened his mouth wide again as he spoke, and burst out laughing again. Luang still had a good impression of this giant warrior. It's not because he is very powerful, but because his character is too frank and free and easy. Just like a heroic ancient knight, he is full of courage and heroic spirit. Although he was not very good at drinking, he still had several encounters with Dongli. It's a pity that my boat is too small, otherwise I could invite this big guy to be my helmsman. Luang felt helpless when he thought that his helmsman had not been found yet. With Dongli's strength, it is absolutely easy for him to be his own helmsman. But again, this guy is too big, too big. I am afraid that except for the legendary giant ship that can carry the giant pirates, it is difficult to find such a huge ship in the world to bear them. Not long after chatting, the roasted dinosaur meat started to cook. Smelling the unique fragrance, everyone's stomachs couldn't help but rumbling. Wait a minute, I'll sprinkle some spices on it. At this moment, Shanya suddenly took out a dozen bottles and cans from a small backpack he carried with him. With his nimble hands and feet, he quickly sprinkled all kinds of spices and seasonings with unique aromas on it. After evenly applying all the seasonings, Shanya put away his hands and said to everyone, "Okay, everyone can start enjoying." "Ha ha ha, this piece of meat is too big, let me help you divide it." At this time, Dongli laughed, then pulled out a big sword he carried with him, and began to quickly divide the dinosaur meat in front of him. Soon, everyone had a piece of incredibly large, fragrant, and attractive barbecued meat in their hands. Dong Li looked at everyone and said, "Try it, this guy's meat is quite delicious." Lu Ang glanced at Nami and the other three who were still hesitating, and said with a smile, "Eat, there's no problem with this stuff." Then, Nami and the three of them, who were already extremely hungry, gritted their teeth and started putting the barbecue into their mouths. I saw Nami take a small bite, and the moment it entered his mouth, his eyes suddenly lit up. This is so delicious." The same expression also appeared on the faces of Shinolin and Vivi. The three of them looked a little surprised. They never thought that the meat of such a ferocious-looking dinosaur could be so tender and delicious. The moment it enters the mouth, the aroma is overflowing, and the moment the teeth bite down on the fat and thin meat, a unique kind of refreshing and delicious taste is simply beyond words and indescribable. It's like a dinosaur roaring and running in its mouth. That just right chewiness, that unparalleled elasticity, that fat but not greasy feeling. Almost everyone couldn't help but look intoxicated, and they couldn't help but say 6 words from the bottom of their hearts, "It's so delicious." Seeing the intoxicated looks on everyone's faces, Dongli couldn't help but laugh. "Ha ha ha, I'm not wrong, this guy looks very fierce, but its meat is extremely delicious, it is definitely a delicacy, ha 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 ha." Although they were indeed frightened by the dinosaurs at first and lost half of their souls, at this moment, everyone had to admit that the dinosaur meat was indeed as delicious as imagined. Lu Ang was eating dinosaur meat and tasting the unique wine brewed by the giant tribe, his face full of joy. Looking at the piece of meat in his hand with less than a third left, Lu Ang suddenly thought of a very interesting Chinese proverb. This should be the legendary eating a big piece of meat and drinking a lot of wine. He did not expect that he could not feel the joyful feeling of ancient knights in reality, but he experienced it in this time-traveled world of One Piece. This is really sad. There were fine wines to go with it and delicious meat to eat. It didn't take long for Lu Ang and the 5 of them to eat to their heart's content and their bellies were round and round. Too full, I really can't eat any more." Patting his round belly, Shinolin showed an extremely satisfied smile. Nami also showed a bright smile. She looked at everyone and then at the virgin forest. She suddenly realized that it would be nice to take a trip here. "I'll take care of the ingredients." Shanya said something to everyone, then picked up the sharp kitchen knife he carried with him and began to deal with the various monsters that came along the way. At the same time, somewhere in the forest clearing on this island, there is an extremely exquisite wooden house here. Outside the house, there is a man wearing a blue and white shirt, with a hairstyle like a hook, and glasses with a flash of flame sitting leisurely in front of a small round table drinking coffee. In front of him, there was a shabby reward poster. There are 2 faces on this poster, one is Blue Ogre Dongli and the other is Red Ghost Brigitte. "Remnants of the giant pirates, I didn't expect your bounty to be so high. Now that I, Mr. 3, have discovered it, don't blame me for being ruthless." At this time, Mr. 3 suddenly thought of something, and his face turned gloomy. "By the way, Mr. 5 and Miss, what's going on with Valentine's Day? How long has it been since the agreed time? Why haven't they come yet? It's such a delay." As he spoke, he glanced sideways at the grass on the right. On the grass, there was a little girl in a dress who looked like a loli concentrating on drawing a volcano painting. Looking at the little girl who looked like a Lolita, Mr. 3 felt a little disdainful. "I don't know what's wrong with the boss, he even hired a guy like this. Mr. Golden Week, there is not much time left for you to play. I will start taking action tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. You'd better take it easy. Mr. Golden Week turned his head and looked at Mr. 3 with a blank expression. Seeing the confused look on this guy's face, Mr. 3 couldn't help but hold his forehead, looking like he had a headache. Hey, my God, who are these people? Just when his face was filled with headache, the whole island suddenly shook. Then, a rumble of sound suddenly sounded from a distance. Looking in the direction of the sound, Mr. 3 saw a huge burst of smoke and fire suddenly erupting from a distant volcano. Seeing this scene, he couldn't help but raise his mouth and showed an extremely happy smile. Hey, those two idiots are finally going to fight again. Great, my action can begin. Hearing the rumble of the volcano erupting and looking at the smoke and terrifying firelight rising into the sky, Dongli took a sip of the wine in his hand. The time for the duel has arrived again. As these words fell, Dongli looked serious, and then slowly stood up. Nami looked confused. What duel? Dong Lai didn't answer her, but picked up the giant sword in his hand and walked forward. At the same time, on the other side of the island, a giant also holding a big sword stood up and walked towards Dongli. 2 giants. Seeing that in addition to Dongli, there was another giant on this island giant, Nami and the three of them were frightened. Shanya's eyes widened, and his face was also full of surprise. If there is anyone present who is relatively calm, it is only Luang. He was already familiar with the plot, but he was not surprised at all by this scene. Dongli, it's time for a duel. Come on, Raji, I won't lose to you this time. The two giants charged towards each other with weapons in hand. Soon, a shocking giant battle began. The confrontation between the two of them seemed to explode the whole world. The moment the weapons collided, it would cause the surrounding situation to change color. Let the void transmit the most ferocious and domineering vibrations. In addition, the entire island also made constant rumbling sounds due to the two people's trampling. Like an earthquake, all the onlookers felt incredible and dumbfounded by this fierce and terrifying battle. Vivi said anxiously, "Hurry up and stop them." As the Princess of Alabasta, she actually hates seeing fights. If she hadn't joined Baroque Studio out of necessity, she might never have had the slightest contact with fighting in her life. After getting along with Dongli, Nami and Shinolin also felt that this giant uncle was not a bad person. They also don't want to see such people get injured or even die due to fighting. Therefore, after Vivi spoke, Nami and Shinolin also looked at Luang. Nami's eyes were exposed and he begged, "Captain, please help me quickly. If the fight continues, someone will really die." Shinolin nodded and said, "Yes, we can't just watch them continue to fight. Sir, you are so powerful that you can definitely stop them, so please help." Luang. At this moment, Luang really won over the hearts of these holy mothers. These guys are so kind-hearted at every turn. These two giants are arranged by the plot, and they will duel once the volcano erupts. In addition, in terms of plot arrangements, they will not die. It is really a waste of time to worry. Seeing that Luang was indifferent, Nami and Shinolin looked at each other, nodded, and ran over immediately. I saw a man grabbing one of Luang's arms and starting to plead. "Nami, Captain, please help me, otherwise this uncle may be injured." Shinolin. Yes, sir, I know you are the most just and awe-inspiring, so just take action to stop it. You don't want to see the uncle who is so generous and kind to us get killed, right?" Luang. Although he knew what the two men were doing, Luang couldn't bear it when he saw the strong white breasts shaking in front of his eyes. "Do you know that you are forcing me to commit a crime?" Luang roared in his heart. He really didn't want to get involved in these messy things, but there was nothing he could do to break Nami's upright conspiracy. He was sure that if he didn't take some action, his nose would bleed soon. Luang rolled his eyes at the two of them and said, "I really admire you too." After getting rid of the entanglement of the two beauties, Luang silently held the second-generation ghost around his waist. Shinolin looked at Luang with doubts. "Captain." Obviously this is urging Luang to act quickly. Luang said calmly, "Don't worry, they haven't fallen yet." Nami, Shinolin, Vivi, Shanya. At this moment, Nami and the other three really wanted to rush up and beat Luang up. If these two people fell down, why would you do anything to them? They would have been dead long ago. Seeing that these two people were angry and seemed to be going berserk, Luang quickly said, "Wait a minute, you misunderstood me." Nami. What? Shinolan. Sir, please explain clearly quickly. Luang sighed and said, "To tell you the truth, I actually have the ability to see the future briefly. Otherwise, why would I be able to call out Princess Vivi's name immediately when I see her, and tell her identity when I meet her? When it comes to Nicole Robin, the same is true, precisely because I have this ability." He glanced at everyone and saw that everyone looked shocked and couldn't believe it, and then he continued to say, "You may not believe it, but this is the fact, and you have witnessed it with your own eyes, so, the reason why I am not taking action now is because I know that these two people will only suffer minor injuries if they survive. In addition, there is another very important point." Speaking of this, Luang grinned. "There are also senior cadres from Baroque Studio here." What? Hearing this, Vivi's expression changed instantly. There are only a few senior cadres, and any one of them has the terrifying power of 1 against 100, or even 1 against 1,000. No matter who appears here, it is definitely not a good thing for them. Glancing at Vivi, Luang smiled softly. It was obvious that this guy had a deep understanding of the power of senior Baroque cadres. The ice-smart Nami figured it out immediately. She slapped her palms with a look of understanding. No wonder that woman said we can't reach Alabasta. That's what she meant. Shinolan also frowned slightly. Is it because there will be senior cadres here to stop us, so we can't go? Shanya yawned. He was a little sleepy after just eating. He who had been silent all this time suddenly put his head on his hands, glanced at everyone calmly, and said, "Don't you understand what the captain means? Obviously, the captain means to wait for senior cadres to show up. It's too late now. If we act early, we will easily expose ourselves. If we accidentally fall into the trap of that senior cadre, we will be doomed." Hearing this, Nami and the other three looked at him in surprise. Hearing this, Luang couldn't help but throw an appreciative look at Shanya. This kid's mind is really getting more and more flexible. Looking at Luang's always calm expression, Nami gently bit her beautiful red lips. "Okay, since Captain, you can see the short-term future and have such a detailed plan, then we won't force you." Afterwards, everyone began to stand still and watch the scene of the two giant warriors fighting each other crazily. I have to say that this is really an extremely surging, fierce and shocking battle. The collision of the two men's weapons and the sound of the confrontation shook the void extremely strongly. Even though they were far apart, everyone in Luang could feel the amazing power erupting from that core position. Under the collision of such a terrifying force, even the Poseidon class may not be able to withstand it. The confrontation between the two lasted for a full day and night. At the end of the fight, the two finally fell down from exhaustion. When he saw the two men falling, Luang squinted and said, "The time is almost up, come with me." Nami and others nodded and followed without saying a word. At the same time, in the forest about 1,000 meters away from where the two giants fell, a white figure was running quickly. Behind him, a little girl in a dress followed closely, panting. "Mr. 3. Hurry up, you are too slow, Mr. Golden Week." Mr. Golden Week gasped, I'm running with all my strength." Mr. 3 had a look of disdain on his face. "Ha, just like a turtle, forget it, Lousy won't wait for you, I'll go first." As he spoke, Mr. 3 spread his arms and started running wildly through the forest like a meteor. 100 million belly, hey, it's all mine, it's all mine. Thinking that the giant bounty of 200 million Baileys would soon be in his pocket, Mr. 3 could not help but grin. He ran faster and faster, faster and faster. It was as if there were 200 million Baileys waving to him in front of him, and he was about to fly with excitement. As a senior cadre of the Baroque Studio, he also received a salary, but compared to 200 million belly, it was nothing to mention. With 200 million Baileys, what else can I do to check in and take classes? He immediately became the boss and made the decision by himself. Wouldn't it be great for him to be the boss? With infinite joy, Mr. 3 ran wildly in the direction of the giant. He simply ignored the lowly coming from behind. After running for about a few minutes, Mr. 3 finally came to the two giants. At this time, Dongli and Brigitte were already exhausted. This was their fighting style. Without fighting to the last moment and squeezing out the last bit of strength, the two of them would not be able to give up. This is also the reason why Luang doesn't stop it. The more he stops it, the crazier these two people will be. It's better to let them have a good fight. Anyway, the two of them are equally matched. And according to the plot, the two did not really reach the point of dying together, they just fought until they lost strength. Seeing the two giants who had lost all their strength, Mr. 3 was so excited that he almost started dancing. Oh my, you are indeed two great warriors. This battle is simply wonderful. I can't help but applaud you. Mr. 3 walked back and forth in front of the two giants, seemingly unable to suppress his inner excitement, and he was panting even as he spoke. Dongli, who are you? Brigitte, what are you going to do? Both of them looked at the ant-like human in front of them with confusion, their faces full of confusion. Listening to the two people's questions, Mr. 3 put his right hand on his left chest, and said very proudly and politely, I can introduce myself. My name is Mr. 3, I am from Baroque Studio Senior Cadres and heroes who are about to give your heads to Marine. Marine, you're giving us to Marine. Upon hearing this, Brigitte immediately became angry. You fool, if you dare to do this, I will kill you. Dong Li's eyes were also filled with flames. You clown, get out of my sight, or when I regain my strength, I will trample you into pieces. For the two men who were once members of the giant soldier pirates, Marine was the existence they hated most. If it weren't for Marine, they wouldn't be here. It can be said that the word Marine is the word that the two of them are the most angry, hateful, and least want to hear in their lives. Oh, if you say this, I will be a little scared. Mr. 3 patted his chest and looked scared. Dong Li said angrily, since you are scared, why don't you get out of here quickly, lousy? After hearing this, Mr. 3 crossed his arms and looked at Dong Li sideways, his face completely changed into a disdainful one, and there was no trace of the fearful face just now. He said with a mocking look on his face, oh, scared? You are overthinking it. If you two were still full of energy and jumping around, I might still be afraid, but now. Glancing at the two people who were unable to move, Mr. 3 shook his head with contempt on his face. It's not easy for me to kill you. Forget it, time is precious, you should just die obediently. Mr. 3 grinned, then stretched out his hands, and a series of white wax oil quickly dripped from his palms like mud. Let you feel the horror of being sealed into a wax statue. With a burst of wild laughter, Mr. 3 suddenly sprayed the wax oil of the waves into the open space between the two giants. Come out, my work of art. Snow Wax Paradise. Under the crazy spray of wax oil, soon, a giant rotating amusement park made entirely of wax oil, like a 7-layer cake, appeared in the center of the giant. As the paradise continued to rotate, a layer of wax soon appeared on Dongli and Brigitte's bodies. Dongli looked surprised. What on earth is this? Brigitte yelled. Why are there layers of wax on my body? What are you doing? Mr. 3. Hey, I'm not doing anything, I just want to slowly watch the two of you become my wax sculpture piece of art. Speaking of this, Mr. 3 suddenly remembered something, and then said, oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you. In fact, I am still a devil fruit user. I eat the wax devil fruit and can be free. How about using wax oil for attack and defense? Isn't it very powerful? Dong Li gritted his teeth and stared at Mr. 3 with a look of dismay. You despicable and shameless villain. If you have the ability, wait for us to recover before we can decide the outcome. What kind of man are you like? Brigitte roared. As a warrior of the giant clan, he despised such small tricks and tricks the most. If you are a man, you should take up arms and fight to the death. It's a pity that they all underestimated Mr. 3's face. Mr. 3 covered his mouth and laughed. I'm sorry, I'm not interested in this kind of meaningless battle. At this moment, an extremely lazy voice suddenly sounded behind Mr. 3. Really, actually, I feel the same way. Upon hearing this, Mr. 3's face changed slightly and he quickly turned around to take a look. Under his glare, a man with an ordinary face wearing long black clothes slowly walked out of the forest with a sword hanging from his waist. Afterwards, 4 more figures came behind the man in succession. These people are naturally none other than the 5 Luangs. Glancing at Mr. 3, Luang smiled and said, Old Tai, it's not very good for you to scheme against others like this. Mr. 3 glanced at Luang and the other 5, and said with a wary expression, Ha, who are you? Lu Ang yawned and said, I really don't like talking nonsense. Why does everyone like to ask this? Okay, even if it means death, I will let you be a sensible person. I am here to capture you. Could it be, you're Marine? Mr. 3 looked horrified. As a pirate with a bounty on his head, Mr. 3 also has a high bounty, so what he fears most is meeting Marine. He knows that although he has some strength, he is far from being as good as those real big pirates, and he has not yet reached the point where he can ignore Marine. If he meets a slightly stronger Marine, he'll be completely screwed. At this moment, Mr. 3 suddenly noticed Vivi. Wait, are you Mr. Wednesday? Although Vivi is not very powerful, she is also one of the mid-level cadres, and Mr. 3 is still somewhat impressed by her. Vivi was a little nervous after being recognized, but she quickly gritted her teeth and stood up. I am no longer a Baroque person. Don't call me by this code name anymore. Lu Ang said. Okay, let's stop the meaningless chat here. As he spoke, he threw a rope out of his pocket, and then said to Mr. 3, do you want to tie it yourself, or should I help you? The moment he saw the rope, Mr. 3 was stunned for a moment, and then couldn't help but slap his thigh and burst into laughter. You idiot, ha ha ha, who do you think you are? If you want me to tie myself up, I will tie myself up. Do you want to be so funny? Halfway through his laughter, Mr. 3 suddenly looked at Lu Ang with a sinister expression, come here if you can. Even if you are Marine, I'm not afraid of you. As he spoke, Mr. 3 quickly turned around and came to the rotating wax paradise. At this moment, there was a bad smile on his long and square face, showing a face that said if you have the ability, just come over. Because he saw Mr. Golden Week coming, and he was hiding on the grass on the side. As long as Lu Ang dares to come over, Mr. Golden Week's Devil Fruit ability will definitely control his actions in an instant. By then, with the power of this wax oil paradise, it won't take long to turn Lu Ang into a wax statue. Unfortunately, Lu Ang is not Luffy, nor is he Zoro. With a plugin that has a thorough understanding of the original plot, and the Conqueror's domineering attitude, he already knew the thoughts of this wretched man clearly. Although this guy will be of some help to the protagonist group later on, he is the protagonist group, not himself. Okay, since you asked me to come over. Lu Ang's expression calmed down, and he suddenly turned his head to the left, directly releasing Conqueror's domineering energy. In an instant, a terrifying invisible wave of air surged away. Mr. Golden Week, who was hiding in the grass and preparing to steal the chicken, had no time to react when he felt a huge roar coming over him. His head went blank and he fainted in the blink of an eye. Mr. 3, who noticed the movement of his companion, did not expect that it would turn out like this, and he was instantly confused. What happened? It's over. With a casual snort, Lu Ang swayed and came directly in front of Mr. 3. What? Mr. 3's eyes widened. He did not expect Lu Ang to be so fast, and he was in front of him in the blink of an eye. He wanted to make a move but had no chance to react. How could there be such a terrifying speed? Who is he? Could it be that he is a senior general of Marine? Oh my God, am I going to die? At this moment, countless thoughts passed through Mr. 3's head. But as a senior cadre of Baroque and a Devil Fruit user, he could do nothing at this moment. He could only watch helplessly as Lu Ang's armed and domineering fist suddenly hit his stomach with the most ferocious and domineering force. Wow! With a scream, Mr. 3 flew out instantly as if he had been hit by a giant beast. With a burst of blood splashing in the void, and a loud bang, his whole body was forcibly embedded on the wax oil paradise. The severe pain caused Mr. 3 to faint instantly. Ding! Congratulations on defeating the Devil Fruit user Gardino, and gaining the Wax Devil Fruit ability +1. When the long-lost system sound echoed in Lu Ang's head again, he calmly took out his second-generation ghost. He didn't want the ability of this Devil Fruit at all. The reason why he didn't kill this guy was purely because he wanted to capture him and take him to the Marine in exchange for a bounty. After all, this guy's bounty is a full 33 million belly, which is far more than the dragon. Blood Moon. With Lu Ang's casual wave, the entire wax oil paradise was split into two and collapsed directly. After the collapse, the paradise stopped functioning. Naturally, it would no longer apply wax oil to the two giants to continuously block them. By the way, there's that guy. After solving this bullshit paradise, Lu Ang suddenly thought of the little girl who had just fainted. That little lowly looks small, but the bounty is not low. According to the Pirate Bounty Directory, the latest bounty for Mr. Golden Week is a full 30 million belly, which is a full 10 million higher than the dragon. How could Luang let go of such a huge bounty so easily? Without saying a word, he turned around and walked towards the grass, and picked up the little guy who wanted to steal the chicken. When did she appear there? Nami couldn't help but be surprised when she saw the little girl being caught by Luang with her eyes closed. Shinolan said, "Sir, when did you find out?" The moment Vivi saw the little girl, her expression changed slightly. Others don't know, so she doesn't know. This guy is none other than one of the senior cadres of Baroque Studio, Mr. Golden Week. As a devil fruit user, she is also one of the subordinates whom the boss behind the scenes attaches great importance to. Vivi never expected that this guy would be discovered by Luang and killed without knowing it. Contacting Mr. Five and Mr. Valentine, whom Luang had seen previously killed at Whiskey Peak, and Nico Robin behind him, Vivi suddenly challenged Luang to defeat the Baroque Studio, and even defeated the legendary Shichibukai Crow. Kidar has greater confidence. Chapter 71. Luang glanced at Shinolan, pointed at his eyes and smiled. "Of course I found it with my eyes." Then he ordered everyone to start cleaning the wax stains on the two giants. Although it was not much, it still had an impact on the two giants' actions. Miss Golden Week and Mr. 3 were directly tied up by the big guys, especially Mr. 3, who looked very obscene. Although this guy looks very vulgar and smiles even more vulgarly, his power is not simple at all. Back then, he almost wiped out the entire protagonist group with the power of one person. If he wasn't careful, he might fall into his trap again. After waiting for about a full day, the two giants gradually recovered their strength. After that, Luang and others stayed here for about 2 days, eating and drinking for a while before reluctantly leaving. The reason why I say reluctant to leave is because although the monsters here are very scary, there are also many. However, their meat is really tender and delicious. After all, these big guys are eating and being eaten every day, escaping and chasing them. If they didn't run fast, they would have died. Because of this, in order to adapt to the living environment here, there are almost no monsters that seem unable to run. No matter what kind of monster, big or small, they all have extremely developed and strong muscles. Therefore, the meat of these guys tastes extra delicious and chewy. Of course, before returning to the ship, Luang also helped Shanya organize a cabin full of food. This food is enough to support a boatload of people for at least 3 months. Soon, the two giants waved goodbye to Luang and his group, watching them leave while laughing. And everyone who left the small garden soon set foot on the route to Alabasta again, and a new journey began again. As usual, Luang came to the deck again after breakfast to enjoy the sea breeze. After blowing the cool sea breeze for a while and looking at the endless sea to refresh himself, he would turn around and enter his own comfortable time. At this time, Nami suddenly walked onto the deck and looked at Luang's back. She walked over with a smile. "Captain, are you blowing the wind again?" Luang put his hands in his pockets, looked at the end of the sea, and slowly said, "Nami, do you know what is the most charming place in this sea?" Nami. Huh. She looked at Luang's side face. She didn't expect that this captain, who looked ordinary but also had infinite charm, would suddenly ask this question. After hesitating for a few seconds, Nami gently bit her mouth and said softly, "Is it unknown?" A flash of wonder flashed across Luang's eyes, and he nodded. "Yes, it is the unknown. The unknown is the most curious and desirable thing. It is precisely because of the unknown that everyone wants to decipher it and explore the end. What kind of existence exists?" Speaking of this, Luang suddenly grinned. However, in this era, the most attractive thing about this sea is Raftru. After Nami heard this, a charming smile appeared on her cute little cherry mouth, and she nodded slightly. Looking at the deep blue ocean, looking at the seagulls flying in the distance, listening to the sound of the waves and the intertwined sounds of the seagulls' cries, she lightly opened her red lips and exhaled softly. Yes, because of the words of One Piece, all the pirates in the entire sea have gone crazy, and even many civilians have joined the ranks of pirates. This era should be called the era of great pirates. Luang was stunned for a moment. He didn't expect Nami to sum up the story in such a sentence that fits the plot. At this moment, Nami suddenly looked confused. Her body swayed slightly, as if she was a little unsteady on her feet. Luang's eyes looked strange. Huh? What's wrong with you? Nami shook his head and said with a wry smile, maybe it's because I didn't get any rest last night. I'm going to take a good rest first. It's okay. Then Nami waved his hand, turned around and walked into the cabin. After watching the devil's figure leave his sight and finally disappear into the cabin, Luang's eyes flashed with worry. He did not forget that in the original plot, during this time period, Nami seemed to be sick. Hey, it's so troublesome. Looking at the distant blue sea and sky, Luang suddenly sighed deeply. Ever since the restaurant on the sea, he had always wanted to find a doctor as his partner. But this thing can't be found casually. After all, it needs to be with the ship for a long time. If the little doctor had an average physique, he would have destroyed himself before he could work. Therefore, if Luang is looking for a doctor, he must look for a doctor with extremely strong medical skills and physical fitness. At this moment, he suddenly thought of Chopper, and he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows slightly. Speaking of which, since fate has arranged the course of the plot for me, I should have the final say on how to play it. If it doesn't work, I'll kill that Chopper guy first. Let's improve it and have an extra pet to play with, it seems to be very nice. Luang has not forgotten that in the original plot, Chopper seemed to be a harmless group favorite, and the bounty was only 50 belly at the beginning. But when this guy gets angry, he becomes extremely scary. He directly killed one of the guys with amazing combat power on Judiciary Island. Able to carry, fight, and save others, he is an almost flawless super partner. Of course, the emergency backup food that netizens ridicule is definitely not acceptable. Luang is not so crazy as to use his own flesh and blood as food. That's all, let's follow the original plot and get Chopper up first. Luang is not the kind of person who doesn't know how to adapt. As long as it's powerful for him, then bring it all to me. He didn't care if it was arranged by the plot or not. Since he came to this world, he must be the boss who controls his destiny. Just one word, cool. After settling his mind, Luang returned to his exclusive throne, picked up the book, and continued to read with gusto. Shinolin, Vivi and Shanya walked to the deck together after cleaning the kitchen. Today, Vivi is wearing a tight blue t-shirt, a short skirt with snowflakes, and her long blue shawl hair. The whole person looks more refreshing, more elegant and attractive. For special training needs, Shinolin had already put on a white tight-fitting outfit, making her whole body look even more slim and slim. However, Luang was concentrating on reading at this time, so he did not pay attention to the dressing of these three people. Shinolin. Let's go Shanya, let's go for special training. Seeing Luang concentrating on reading, Shinolin also wisely did not say hello, but directly called Shanya and walked toward the stern of the ship. As for Vivi, she glanced at Luang quietly, then found a corner and sat down. She turned her face sideways and looked at Luang with curiosity. This captain seems to love learning. Vivi didn't expect that Luang, who was killing people and chopping vegetables in the small garden in Whiskey Mountain Town, would actually have a quiet side. Such a man is really too mysterious and unpredictable. She didn't know that a slight change had quietly occurred in her heart amidst the invisible attention. The big ship continued to move in an orderly manner. The days on the boat may seem monotonous, but sometimes, this monotony is also a kind of comfort and comfort. Because, you don't need to think about too many things. As long as there are no big winds and waves, there will be no pirates or Poseidons. Then just follow the direction of the boat and enjoy the leisurely and lazy days along the way. The only drawback on a boat is the monotony. As long as you can overcome the monotony, it will be a fun and comfortable long trip. Breakfast, watch the sea, read a book, lunch, watch the sea, read a book, sleep, dinner, play cards, sleep. The very regular and comfortable life made everyone slowly forget the passage of time, and a week passed quickly. During this week, everyone gradually discovered something strange about Nami. She went from dizziness at the beginning, to weakness and chills, to now, she has developed a high fever. Luang had already expected this. Fortunately, Shanya also knew something about pharmacology, and promptly prepared some ingredients that could dissipate heat for Nami to take. But this can only treat the symptoms and not the root cause. Now we must find a doctor as soon as possible. In the early morning, Luang, who had just gotten up to look at the sea, suddenly briefly saw the future. In that short future scene, he clearly saw a giant sea tornado heading towards the ship. Facing the terrifying power of nature here, even with the power of the 4 emperors, it would be difficult to make any changes. Therefore, Luang shouted to everyone without saying a word, "Alan, Shania, please change your course quickly and head to the right." At the same time, Luang quickly jumped onto the mast and put the canvas away without saying a word. He knew that a terrifying and frightening storm was about to hit. Although he doesn't know how to operate a ship, at least he can occasionally see the short-term future. This is the power of the red-haired super powerful hockey, which has reached the point where he can see the future for a short time. As long as there is danger, his cognition will be triggered and he will be able to show himself the possible dangers. At this moment, Luang suddenly felt that he had really chosen the right person. If it were anyone else, he would probably not be able to escape this disaster. Then, with the cooperation of everyone, the ship's course was quickly changed. And not long after, there was a sudden and terrifying storm. But everyone's ship is only on the edge of the storm. At this time, under the endless terrifying dark clouds, a huge black tornado like a mountain appeared in the direction of the previous ship. Looking at the doomsday-like shocking tornado, everyone took a breath of cold air. Fortunately, the course was changed in advance. Otherwise, all of them would have perished in the sea at this moment. In the face of that terrible tornado, even the Poseidon species would suffocate, tremble, and flee in terror. This is the power of nature. No matter how strong human beings are, they are still as weak as ants in the face of such terrible power. "Vivi, let me go check on Nami. I'm really worried." Luang nodded. "Yes." Vivi glanced at Luang, then turned and walked into the cabin. Not long after, Vivi rushed up anxiously. "It's not good. Nami's fever has reached 40 degrees, and her body temperature seems to be rising." After hearing this, everyone immediately put down what they were doing and rushed down without saying a word. When they came to Nami's bedroom, Luang, who was sitting on Nami's bedside, touched her forehead and found that it was very hot. Without a thermometer, Luang knew that Nami was in serious condition. Shanya frowned. "We must find a doctor immediately. The effect of dietary therapy is limited." Of course everyone understands this, but where can we find a doctor in the vast sea? At this moment, the big ship suddenly rocked. Luang, who had reached the peak of his domineering power, suddenly felt something. He frowned slightly and said to everyone, "Someone is attacking the ship. I'll go up and have a look." Shinolin, "Sir, be careful." Luang didn't have time to respond and climbed up directly. Soon, Luang, who came to the deck, understood what was going on. "I saw a strange pirate ship appearing less than 300 meters away from me. On this ship, an old man wearing a snow-white hooded shawl and a chin like an iron can was excitedly directing the crew to fire continuously. In the blink of an eye, dozens of dark cannonballs fell from the sky. It turned out to be this wretched old guy. With just one glance, Luang recognized that the person coming was none other than Valpo, who had disgusted the protagonist group several times before. Looking at the flying shells, Luang raised his brows slightly, without any fear in his eyes. Luang's own ships are very strong and durable, but if they are hit by so many cannonballs at the same time, they will suffer considerable damage. Although this ship was originally snatched from that guy in Alrita, as Luang and others have been sailing for a long time, this is already their little home, and there is no way they can be destroyed easily by these guys. Without the slightest hesitation, Luang pulled out the second-generation ghost from his waist without saying a word. He waved his hand casually, and a terrifying gust of wind swept out in an instant. In an instant, all the cannonballs suddenly stopped and then rolled away. Boom! Along with several explosions, bursts of fire and smoke appeared on the opposite ship. "Oops, what's going on? What's going on? How come my cannonballs are flying back?" Seeing the flames all over the ship and the damaged deck, Valpo was filled with doubts and jumped up in anger. "Pull the boat closer to me, I will personally snatch this big boat over." Soon, under Valpo's order, a group of crew members controlled the direction and speed of the ship and began to approach Luang. At this time, the weather has turned cold, and little snowflakes are gradually falling from the sky. Watching these beautiful little snows falling bit by bit on his body, palms, and deck, Luang couldn't help but smile. This is the first time he has seen real snow in the world of One Piece, and it is actually much more beautiful than he imagined. Beautiful and picturesque, it looks quite poetic. However, instead of admiring this beautiful scenery, Luang was more focused on the pirate ship that was approaching quickly. He laid the second-generation Kitetsu in his hand, raised the corner of his mouth slightly, and smiled slowly. I'm lucky today, there is another takeaway delivered to my door. Soon, under Valbo's quick urging, his pirate ship approached Luang's ship. There was a muffled sound, and the two ships collided slightly. Then, 3 wooden planks were quickly put up from Valpo's boat. Moahahaha, hurry up, get on lousy quickly, and kill everyone on this ship. As Valpo shouted, a group of pirates from the White Iron Pirates surged in from their pirate ship with swords and clubs. My navigator is still sick, so I can't let you rush up with such a big fanfare and noisy. Luang shook his head slightly, then his eyes turned cold, and second-generation Ghost suddenly swung out. Howling Wolf. With a shocking wolf howl, a blood-red terrifying giant wolf suddenly burst out of the air, and the next second it rushed away in the eyes of countless people with fear and shock. Wow! There was a shrill scream, and hundreds of members of the White Iron Pirates were immediately torn into pieces by the wolf's fangs. Countless pieces of flesh and blood, broken limbs and broken arms also fell from the air into the sea, and the sea area was dyed red in the blink of an eye. With one sword, he killed hundreds of members of the White Iron Pirate ship instantly with just one sword. The other pirates who were about to rush forward were so frightened that their legs weakened instantly when they saw this scene. They were all nestled in their own boats, and they didn't dare to take another step over. Valpo was also frightened by this sword. How can this guy's swordsmanship be so terrifying? With the power here, shouldn't he be unknown? Looking at the ordinary-looking young man in front of him, Valpo suddenly became a little frightened. One sword can kill 100 people instantly. This kind of swordsmanship is definitely not weak even in the entire Great Channel. He gritted his teeth and roared at Luang. Little Guido, if you have the ability, come forward. Luang was stunned for a moment, and then Gui Che tapped his shoulder lightly, and said with great interest, my name is Aruba Luang, how about it, Captain Valpo, what do you have to say? Wah! What? You are Aruba Luang. Upon hearing this name, Valpo was immediately stunned. He may not necessarily know it to others, but the reputation of this name is really too great. Because Valpo also subscribes to the Seagull newspaper, he knows a lot of world news. Among them, one piece of news that concerned him was the emergence of a new bounty hunter. This person's name is Aruba Luang. In just half a year, they successively captured Captain Cheeto Starcrow, who faked his death, the captain and 2 officers of the Dragon Pirates, Thunderfish of the Thunderfish Pirates, Pirate Admiral Creek, and the legendary the Great Pirate and Murderer of the East China Sea, Luca, who has disappeared for a long time and was a contemporary of One Piece. With his extremely brilliant record, Luang became a bounty hunter that everyone talks about overnight. After learning the news that this guy entered the Great Channel from the East China Sea, Valpo was very nervous for a time. But thinking about it later, this sea is so big that sometimes I may not be able to find the north. The probability of 2 people meeting should be extremely low. Therefore, he didn't take it to heart later. But despite all his thoughts, he never imagined that he would be so lucky today and run into this terrible guy head-on. A strong man who could kill the murderer Luca, Valpo knew that he was definitely no match. He thought for a while, then opened his mouth without saying a word, and turned a tongue in his mouth into a cannon. As the Tunton fruit, no matter what he swallows, he can possess the properties and power of that thing in the blink of an eye. Muhaha, I don't care what kind of bounty hunter you are, first try to see how powerful I am, tongue cannon. Boom! With the sound of a cannon, a huge cannonball flew towards Luang at an extremely fast speed. Watching the huge cannonball flying towards him, Luang looked calm and just slightly tightened his grip on the second-generation ghost in his hand. Breath of wind. Luang waved his hand, and a terrifying gust of wind immediately swept out, rolling back the flying shells in an instant. Boom! There was a loud noise, and before Valpo could react, he was directly hit by the cannonball and covered with scars. His fat body was directly shocked by the bombardment of the artillery shells, and he took 7 or 8 steps back, and then he sat on the ground in one fell swoop. Captain. At this time, his 2 most loyal subordinates came up one after another and looked at Valpo with worried faces. Luang was very familiar with these 2 people. One is a sharpshooter with long arms, like a gibbon, a wavy lip, and wearing strange clothes. His name is Jace. The other one was a boxer wearing a yellow cape, an afro, and black gloves on his hands. He looked particularly greasy and vulgar. This boxer's name is Cromariman. These 2 people will merge and become a more vulgar guy. Luang is still a little impressed by this. Valpo gritted his teeth and looked at Luang across from him with shock and fear. Although he had long known Luang's identity through the Seagull newspaper, he did not expect that he was much more powerful than what he saw in the newspaper. With just a casual wave, he killed more than 100 of his men, and with another wave, his powerful cannonball bounced back again. This kind of swordsman who possesses destructive power with just a raise of his hands and feet is definitely not an ordinary person. Valpo was sweating coldly. He was almost defeated in just one meeting. He now knew one thing very clearly. That's me, and I'm definitely no match for this guy. In this case, then the 36 strategies are the best. He grinned and suddenly shouted, "Young men, turn around quickly and we'll leave immediately. We can't fight this guy." After hearing Valpo's words, all the members of the White Iron Pirates were stunned for a moment. "Didn't you want to rob the other party's ship? Why did you suddenly change your mind?" But the captain's words were everything. No one dared to hesitate and set off immediately. Seeing the boat slowly leaving, Valpo put his hands on his hips and smiled triumphantly at Luang. "Ha ha ha ha, you stupid swordsman, your death will be the next time we meet. I will let you go this time." Seeing that he was about to leave after seeing the takeaway, how could Luang let go so easily? After hearing Valpo's words, he slowly raised the 2nd generation ghost in his hand and said with a very polite smile, "No need to do it next time. Since you are here, let's stay and have a cup of tea before leaving." Bar. After saying this, Luang's eyes showed a cold light, and without saying a word, he slashed down with his sword. Blood moon. In an instant, a giant blood-red arc moon suddenly flew out from the extremely sharp 2nd generation Kidetsu. What? Valpo's eyes suddenly bulged. In his horrified gaze, the entire White Iron Pirate's ship was cut off at the waist by a huge bloody slash. Oh my god, how can there be such terrible swordsmanship? Valpo's 2 loyal men held their heads in their hands and looked in disbelief. I actually cut off my precious ship with one sword. Oh no, no, it's not possible. My ship, my dream, my ambition. After seeing the boat cut off in the middle, Valpo collapsed. Seeing the whole ship of pirates collapsed, Luang grinned and said, "Run over now, there is still a glimmer of hope." This. Seeing Luang's devilish smile, Valpo was trembling all over. Lines of cold sweat continued to break out, flow down, break out again, and flow down again. He has the ability to swallow the devil fruit, and if he falls into the sea, he will really die. What to do, should I go there? However, he is a bounty hunter. If I go there, I will definitely be captured and given to Marine. Valpo grabbed his head and shook it from side to side. The goatee almost cried out of fear. Boxer Chromaliman said nervously, "Captain, our ship is going to sink. What should we do? Weiss, the marksman and staff officer, touched the back of his head and said, "Captain, we have a small boat and we can leave through the small boat." When Valpo heard this, he couldn't help but look surprised. "Is there a boat? Hurry up, or it will sink soon." Then the marksman Weiss immediately trotted to the railing and quickly stretched out his gibbon-like hands to drive the Shikai boat hanging on the side. "Is it really appropriate to do such a little trick in front of me?" Luang shook his head, and without saying a word, he swung his sword again. In an instant, a terrifying blood-red slash cut Weiss and the small wooden boat in two. Wow! As the screams rang out, this nondescript and weird-looking marksman instantly split into 2 parts and died on the spot. Valpo looked horrified, never expecting that Luang would not leave him any way to survive. "If you don't eat the toast, you'll be fined with wine. I just asked you to come up and make tea. Now, get over here, lousy." Luang's eyes were cold, and he pointed at Valpo with 2nd generation ghost without any polite words. The meaning is quite clear, either Laozi will kill you with a sword, or you will get on the boat obediently. Looking at the purple light flashing and the extremely sharp demon knife, Valpo swallowed his saliva. He knew that he had no way out. I'm leaving, you, take care of yourself. Valpo patted the shoulder of Cromariman, his only confidant, and then took a running start. I saw him jump up suddenly, and with a loud bang, he jumped directly onto Luang's boat. Valpo's bounty is currently 48 million baileys, which is neither high nor low. For Luang, no matter how small the mosquito is, it is still meat, let alone meat delivered to his door. Without saying a word, he took a big rope and quickly tied the guy up. After being tied up, Luang looked at Valpo with cold eyes and said, I suggest you not to have any thoughts of resisting or escaping. Just once, I will kill you. When he heard the words, kill you, a chill ran through Valpo's body. He immediately raised his chin and said with a mocking smile, Hey, no, how could it be, there is no way I would do such a thing. Luang glanced at this guy with disdain, then picked him up and walked quickly towards the cabin. With a bang, Luang threw Valpo into one of the secret rooms as casually as throwing garbage. This is separate from the secret room where Mr. 3 and Mr. 3 are locked up, because Luang knows what this guy is capable of. In addition, Luang also used tape to tape his mouth right away. After all, this old and wretched man is a person with devil fruit abilities who claims to eat anything. If he accidentally destroys the boat, it will be the end of the world. After taking care of this guy, Luang quickly returned to his deck. According to the plot, this fate should lead the ship to the Drum Kingdom. Luang is very familiar with the direction of this story. However, he found that his body seemed a bit strong. In this gradually cooling weather, I am not afraid of the cold at all. Could it be said that when I gained strength, I also gained physique? Luang touched his chin, thinking about this possibility. He tentatively called the system, but unfortunately the system had no response at all. It is completely different from the novels I have read before. The protagonist can check his system anytime and anywhere when he travels with the system. Fortunately for him, the system disappeared directly. If it weren't for the system's beep in his mind when he hit someone, he would have thought that the system was gone. However, no matter what, it is a good thing that I am not afraid of hot or cold. After all, this is the world of One Piece. You may encounter any kind of situation. Having a strong physical fitness will definitely bring you good and bad things. In the cabin, everyone is still taking care of Nami. On the deck, Luang looked ahead with worry. Although he knew that the God of Destiny would definitely guide his ship to the Drum Kingdom, he was still worried about Nami's health. That's nonsense. Hurry up if you want. Isn't it fun to have people waiting like this? Luang took the second-generation ghost and pointed at the sky. Brother, really, it's boring if you play like this. Human lives are at stake. Can you fix it faster? As if he heard Luang's call, a thunder flashed across the sky. For others, this terrifying thunder is enough to scare people out of their wits. But Luang was not afraid. He raised the corner of his mouth slightly and continued to challenge, if you can hear me, then be more relaxed. Otherwise, in the next plot, I will not play with you and just find another place. Retire in place. As if being stimulated by Luang's words, the entire sea suddenly became turbulent, and his ship was carried forward rapidly by the waves. The extremely fast speed was comparable to that of a racing car, and the sea breeze blowing in the face even slapped my face. If his body wasn't strong enough, Luang felt like he would be red and swollen by the sea breeze. Feeling the sudden acceleration, Luang couldn't help but grin. It seems that this fierce operation is quite effective, and my ship can take off in no time. He doesn't know how long it will take to get there, but what is certain is that at the current speed, the time can definitely be shortened by no less than 3 times. After almost half a day passed, Luang finally saw a continent covered with ice and snow appearing in front of him. Picking up the telescope and looking at the snowy mountains rising into the sky in the distance, he showed a long-lost satisfied smile. Obviously, this is the Drum Kingdom. It seems that this stimulation of skills is quite reliable. If you encounter similar problems in the future, you can continue playing. Luang felt a little bit of juju in his heart. Not long after, the ship gradually docked. On this journey, there was no need for a navigator, not even a helmsman. At this point, After hearing Lu Wang's notice, everyone on the deck was stunned. Looking at the huge iceberg in front of them and the world of ice and snow that stretches thousands of miles, everyone showed a hint of surprise. Is this the kingdom of ice and snow, the legendary kingdom of drums? Vivi looked at a snowflake floating in her hand with a hint of surprise in her eyes. At this moment, Lu Wang suddenly raised his eyebrows slightly and said to everyone, "Be careful, someone is coming." Following Lu Wang's warning and reminder, everyone soon saw a group of people standing on the shore holding various long and short muskets, as well as various swords and weapons. These people were all wearing thick cotton-padded jackets, and their eyes showed a hint of alertness and vigilance. It was obvious that they were all residents here. At this time, Vivi glanced at everyone and said in a loud voice, "Everyone, don't worry, we are not pirates, we are just tourists passing by. A friend of ours is sick and wants to see a doctor. Do you have a doctor here? Can you help me? If we can't help find a doctor to take a look, she's really going to die soon." After hearing this and looking at the few people on the boat, they found that they did not look like pirates, and the residents relaxed a little. At this time, a burly man with short hair wearing a green cotton robe walked out. Seeing this guy, Lu Wang immediately recognized him. He was the current king of the Drum Kingdom, Doradun. Compared to the tyrannical and insignificant Valpo, this guy is much kinder to the people. Looking at Dalton with soft eyes and honest face, Lu Wang sighed. Sure enough, the love comes from the heart. Dalton glanced at everyone, and then said, "Let's go ashore first and then talk." Then everyone quickly got off the boat and followed Doradun's footsteps to the land. As the strongest captain, Lu Wang naturally has the task of carrying Nami on his back. Feeling the increasingly hot fever, Lu Wang felt very uncomfortable inside. As he walked, Doradun said, "Due to the tyranny of the previous king, all the doctors in this country were taken away. Now there is only one witch doctor in the whole country. She lives on a big snowy mountain far away from here." Lu Wang, who was familiar with the plot, had no time to listen to Dalton's nonsense, so he interrupted without saying anything. "I know, there's no need to talk about this nonsense, just tell me how to get there." Dalton was stunned for a moment. At this time, Vivi rolled her eyes at Lu Wang, and then quickly waved her hand and explained, "Please don't be offended. Our captain is worried about the health of the crew, so his tone is a bit urgent. Please don't take it to your heart." Shinolin also nodded and said quickly, Yes, our husband is not a bad person, please don't mind." Shanya also rolled his eyes at Lu Wang at this time, his face speechless. "Now we are begging others, not others begging us, big brother." Lu Wang also realized at this time that he was a little irritable and was about to say something. But Dalton laughed and said, it's okay, this guy is also a temperamental person. Such a person is much better than a cunning pirate." Speaking of this, Doradun pointed far ahead. At the end of his sight, there was a super mountain that was obviously many times larger than other snow-capped mountains. He said, "Have you seen the giant snow mountain in the distance? The witch doctor is on it, but it's a long way to go, so you have to take care." "Thanks." Lu Wang nodded, then glanced at everyone and said, "The rest of you can stay here, and leave the rest to me." At this time, Shanya suddenly walked up. He crossed his arms and said seriously, "I'll go with you. At least I have a helper." Lu Wang pondered for a moment, and finally shook his head decisively and refused directly. He did not forget that there was not only a snowstorm along the way, but also a monster like Labang. Although Shanya is much stronger now, Lu Wang still doesn't want him to take risks. "Just stay here, protect the two of them, and take a look at our ship by the way. That's it, I'm leaving." After saying this, Lu Wang carried Nami forward without saying a word. Without the crew on his side, Lu Wang no longer controlled his speed and started running wildly. In addition, in order to prevent Nami from falling off his body, Lu Wang also used the ability of the devil fruit he obtained from Mr. 3 to directly glue himself and Nami together with wax. Now, he can walk wildly on the snow at full running speed. Fortunately, he had the foresight to tie up that Valbo right from the beginning. Otherwise, this wretched old man would probably appear at this moment and give him a few blows. Because of the plot arrangement, Valpo will appear at this time and discuss the protagonist. The obscene scene of the sneak attack is still fresh in Lu Wang's memory. Although, he can still kill him with one sword, but now is obviously not the time to waste time. Lu Wang, who accelerated with all his strength, almost made no trace of his steps on the snow, and his whole body ran like lightning in the snow. After receiving the red-haired ability, this mere blizzard is nothing. Walking in the vast white world, Lu Wang looked indifferent and flew by. Not long after, he saw a little rabbit howling at a pile of heavy snow while constantly stretching out its paws to dig at the slush. Seeing this scene, Lu Wang remained silent and stopped slightly as he passed by. The little rabbit had a pair of small blood-red eyes and kept growling at Lu Wang. But Lu Wang didn't care. He glanced at the big snowdrift next to him. Then he stretched out his hand and pulled up the big paw that was exposed outside the snowdrift. It turned out that this was a huge labang buried in the snow. In the Drum Kingdom, avalanches are a common occurrence. As a native aboriginal, labang is very adaptable to the climate here. But when facing an avalanche, sometimes it is inevitable to encounter a buried disaster. After pulling up the labang, Lu Wang continued to run quickly. This scene seems familiar. Halfway through the run, Lu Wang suddenly remembered what was going on. It seems that in the original plot, Luffy, the protagonist, also did the same thing. Then, it seemed that after encountering Valpo, these rabbits rushed forward in order to repay their kindness. However, this time he does not need to repay the favor. Running quickly on the snow, feeling the biting cold wind blowing continuously from his ears, Lu Wang remained silent. At this time, Nami, who had a severe fever, slowly opened her eyes. Looking at the snow-white world, she murmured softly, "Where are we? Am I in heaven?" Hearing Nami's voice, Lu Wang couldn't help but said, "It's not heaven, it's the Drum Kingdom. I'm going to take you to see a doctor now." "Nami, is it the captain? Why are you carrying me on your back? Where are the others? I'm so dizzy and so hot." Lu Wang sighed deeply. At this moment, he could finally understand a little bit of the protagonist's mood. If he hadn't traveled through time, no matter how much he sympathized with it, he wouldn't have felt this heart-wrenching feeling now. As he ran wildly, he kept exhaling white air. After a few seconds, Lu Wang finally said, "Others are resting peacefully in the town. You don't have to worry about anything. I will take you to see a doctor now." "Nami, I'm sorry, Captain, I'm really useless." Lu Wang, at this time, he didn't know what to say. This was all arranged by the god of fate for him. He really wanted to tell Nami that your illness was also arranged, and there was no need to say anything about it. Anyway, now I just need to hurry up and go to the snowy mountain where Chopper is to find the witch doctor. It was also because of the severe fever. After Nami said a few words, he fell asleep again. Lu Wang shook his head and continued to run wildly. At this time, the snowstorm is getting bigger and bigger. As time passed, Lu Wang found that his eyes were almost blocked by snowflakes. The terrifying blizzard is like a devil, trying to devour all living creatures in this white world. The whistling sound of wind and snow, and the wind as sharp as a sword, constantly challenge Lu Wang's limits. Temperatures as cold as freezing, crazy wind and snow, and slush all over the ground making it difficult to walk. All the worst and most difficult external environments are blocking Lu Wang from moving forward. In the end, he really had no choice but to close his eyes and rely on his domineering power to walk. With the strongest domineering power in the world, Lu Wang found that even if he closed his eyes, he could clearly perceive all the scenery in front of him. In this way, relying on the top level of domineering power, Lu Wang relied on his stubborn willpower and strong physical fitness. After driving for about 2 hours, we finally arrived under the snow-capped mountains. Now he still has the power of the 4 emperors to resist the attack of the blizzard, but the protagonist Luffy did not have it before. Comparing the two, Lu Wang has to admire the protagonist's willpower. After all, he was guilty, but he was not. Of course, there is no need to say more about what happened later. After all, he is the protagonist. If he didn't have the aura of the protagonist, he would have been killed countless times. Standing under the snow-capped mountains, looking up at the towering snow-capped mountains, Lu Wang stretched out his hands without saying a word. Armed color entanglement. In an instant, both hands turned into a rigid state as dark as ink. Then, he followed Luffy's example, step by step, and inserted himself into the snowy mountain with his hands. Relying on the climbing mode, we are slowly approaching the snow-capped mountains. Because of the effect of the armed color winding, the snowy mountain looks extremely soft under Lu Wang's domineering hands wrapped in armed color, and can be easily broken through. Coupled with the blessing of his extremely powerful physical strength, it only took about half an hour for Lu Wang to reach the snowy mountain. When he finally stood on the top of the snow-capped mountain and looked at the familiar white castle in his memory, Lu Wang smiled. Good guys, we finally arrived at our destination. After glancing at this majestic castle and a skull-headed flag standing next to it, Lu Wang's eyes revealed a strange look. He knew a thing or two about the story and origin behind the skull flag, but now was not the time to remember it. He glanced at Nami behind him, whose face was already flushed. His heart tightened, and he quickly walked toward the castle without saying a word. Soon, he entered the castle. Just as he entered the castle, a reindeer holding a glass bottle and walking slowly in the upstairs corridor suddenly caught his eye. Chopper. Lu Wang subconsciously called out Chopper's name, and with just this call, Chopper upstairs suddenly jumped in fright. The next second, he ran wildly towards the side of the corridor without saying a word. In the blink of an eye, this guy disappeared without a trace. Lu Wang, by the way, do I look that scary? He shook his head, his face speechless. At this moment, an old woman in purple clothes walked out of the upstairs corridor from one of the rooms carrying a cup of coffee. Oh, it turns out there are guests. Lu Wang knew this old woman, she was the witch doctor Dr. Gulewa. Seeing this guy, Lu Wang immediately beamed with joy and quickly said, "What, this grandma, can you?" Before he could finish his words, a large number of swords, guns and sticks were thrown down from upstairs like crazy. Fortunately, seeing and hearing the domineering force was extremely powerful, and Lu Wang quickly dodged away with an extremely agile posture. Dr. Gulewa threw it and roared, "Who do you call grandma? Who do you call grandma? Who is your grandma? Your whole family is grandma." Only then did Lu Wang remember this guy's reverse scale. Although Dr. Gerva is over 90 years old, she hates it and is very taboo about other people's outspoken expressions about her age. If you have an old character, be prepared to face her crazy sword storm. Although he could kill this old woman with one sword, Lu Wang knew that if he really killed her, he would be almost done as a navigator. In the end, he had no choice but to grit his teeth, force himself to lower his head and said, "Wrong, wrong, I mean, this young and beautiful lady, can you help me see what's wrong with my friend?" Upon hearing this, Dr. Gerva's eyes lit up, and then she put away the silver spear she was about to throw out with a smile. "Oh, how's your friend doing? This guy is so awesome, he changes his face at any time." Lu Wang secretly wiped the cold sweat, and then said politely, "She has a high fever, and it is very serious now. I hope that you, young and beautiful, can help me take a look." After hearing the words, young and beautiful, twice in succession, Dr. Gulewa's whole old face smiled like a blooming chrysanthemum, which was so brilliant. A very satisfied smile appeared on her lips and she said, "Okay, then bring her up quickly." P.S. At this moment, a handsome person named Reader suddenly traveled through the void and came to the protagonist, and said to him, "Brother, do you have a reading skirt that belongs to us? I want to add one to support you, how about it, will you give me face?" Lu Wang was shocked. He is actually the legendary god-tier reader, I will report it to you right away, 1.5.68. Ling, 8.5.66. Not long after, Nami was placed in one of the warm and comfortable small rooms. After Dr. Gerva applied medicine to Nami and gave her an injection, Nami quickly fell into a deep sleep. "It's okay, it's just a high fever caused by a simple viral infection. Just take a good rest and you'll be fine." After treating Nami's condition, Dr. Gulewa stood up and looked at Lu Wang. "Let's go out and have a chat, Mr. Swordsman." Lu Wang. Yeah. As soon as he walked out of the door, Lu Wang saw Chopper walking towards him. He smiled and greeted Chopper and said, "Hello, I am Aruba Lu Wang. Please take care of my friend." Chopper was startled and immediately stepped back dozens of steps. I saw the left side of its face hiding in the door beside it, leaving almost half of its body outside, looking a little naive. Lu Wang couldn't help but smile when he saw this. As expected, this guy is still the same as the original plot, cute and silly. He smiled and said, "I said, are you hiding on the wrong side?" Chopper. Huh, he was startled, then quickly corrected his posture. He immediately hid his body in the door, and then timidly poked out his cute little head. Looking at the blue nose, Luang smiled and shook his head, and then followed Dr. Gulewa to the other side. Dr. Gulewa took out a cigarette from her pocket, lit it with a match, and lit it immediately. Call. She looked at the white world in the distance and said, "Young man, where did you come from?" Luang said, "I come from Windmill Village, a small village in the East China Sea. I am currently a bounty hunter." Dr. Gu Lewa glanced at Luang, suddenly grinned and said, "Do you know you are very famous now?" Luang didn't expect this guy to say this suddenly, and he didn't know how to answer it. "I'm famous." Dr. Gulewa blew out a long smoke ring into the void and said slowly, "Haha, it seems that you really know nothing. You probably haven't subscribed to Seagull newspaper. I suggest you go back. Subscribe. This guy's newspaper has strongholds in almost all cities and towns around the world, and updates all kinds of major news from all over the world every day. If you want to live happily at sea, you still need to understand current affairs." Quote. After saying these words, Dr. Gerva left quickly. Not long after, she took out a stack of newspapers from one of the rooms. "Take it, there are reports about you in these issues." Luang took the newspaper that the other party brought over, and then started to read it with curiosity on his face. Soon, his expression changed slightly. Because, he saw that no less than 5 issues of the newspaper gave him a very important column. The last time, it was directly posted as a headline on a sub-page. The title is just a few words, shocking. "A star bounty hunter from the East China Sea is born." A few very simple words, but they have unexpected power to attract attention. Although this side page of the newspaper is not as good as the front page, its influence is still not bad. Luang fell silent after reading it. He never expected that Marine would expose his information without notifying him at all. Isn't this too disrespectful of martial ethics? Although he is indeed handsome. Like all readers, people love each other, flowers bloom, and beautiful peach blossoms come all the time, but there is no need to be so high profile. After a long time, Luang couldn't help but sigh deeply. Hey, he is really too handsome, which is also a sin. Later, Luang stayed here for a day. It wasn't until he saw that Nami's fever had mostly subsided that he breathed a sigh of relief. Thanks to him for always taking care of me, otherwise I wouldn't know what to do. In the room, Nami looked gratefully at Chopper, who was packing medicine aside. Hearing this, Chopper suddenly looked shy, waved his hands coquettishly and said, "No, I'm not happy at all." Luang. Nami. Good guy, you're grinning from ear to ear, and you're still saying you're unhappy. Do you want to be so funny? Nami. PFF'd, you are so interesting. Seeing this, Luang also smiled and stretched out his right hand, saying, "Thank you for taking such good care of my friend. My name is Aruba Luang. Nice to meet you." Seeing the stretched out hand, Chopper suddenly jumped in fright, and without saying a word, he ducked behind a nearby cabinet. Just like last time, it once again exposed most of its body, leaving only the small side of its face behind the cabinet, which looked very funny. Luang scratched the back of his head and said helplessly, "Do I look so scary?" Nami chuckled. Her rosy complexion had gradually returned to normal, and her smile was particularly sweet and charming. In order to ensure that the condition would not relapse, Nami continued to recuperate here. Luang went down the mountain first, and he wanted to inform his companions. After all, almost 2 days have passed, and those few people must have been waiting anxiously. Not long after, Luang returned again. Seeing Luang coming back, Nami asked with concern, "Didn't the others come with you?" Luang shook his head. "I asked them to wait in the town. After all, this is the top of the snow mountain, and ordinary people can't get up easily." This is the truth, even he spent a lot of effort to get here. If it had been anyone else, even Shanya, it would have been extremely difficult. Not to mention the various snowstorms that came along the way, as well as the avalanches that may break out from time to time. Just climbing this snowy mountain is probably enough to give Xiao Shanya a headache. Anyway, we already know that Nami is starting to recover, so there is nothing to worry about. After that, Luang continued to accompany Nami here for several days until Nami fully recovered. During this period, Luang also spent more time with Chopper, and the two gradually became familiar with each other. Now Chopper no longer feels scared or nervous because of Luang's sudden call. At the same time, under Luang's instruction, Nami also consciously communicated with Chopper. From time to time, she told Chopper a lot of interesting stories, making the little guy laugh, and the inner guard gradually relaxed. In the corridor, listening to the laughter coming from the room, Luang walked to Dr. Gulewa, who was smoking a cigarette with a smile on his face. "Young beautiful doctor, I want to talk to you about something." Dr. Gulewa grinned. Her face was covered with horizontal stripes and she glanced at Luang enthusiastically and said, "Boy, do you want to ask me what the secret is to staying young?" Luang shook his head and said, "I won't mince words, I want Chopper to be my crew member." Dr. Gulewa raised her eyebrows, looked at Luang in surprise for a few seconds, and then took a few puffs of her cigarette. After a while, Dr. Gurva blew out a long smoke ring. "I have no problem. It all depends on what the little guy wants. If you can convince him, then take him away." Hearing this, Luang smiled slightly. As long as the master agreed, the rest of the things would be easy to handle. "With your words, I feel relieved. But, at this moment, Dr. Gu Lewa suddenly looked at Luang and said seriously, "If you really take him on board, then I hope you can treat him well. He is a very soft-hearted and kind-hearted person. It's easy to trust other people's children, you know what I mean." Luang was stunned for a moment, then he gave a thumbs up, pointed at himself and said, "Don't worry, Luang, am not a notorious pirate, but a handsome young man who does good deeds without leaving his name. You can't say that to your partners." After that, Luang stayed in the castle for several days. On several occasions, Luang also talked to Nami alone. The conversation was naturally about how to trick Chopper into boarding the ship. To Luang's surprise, Nami said to him directly, "This matter has been settled." It turned out that during the short time they got together, Nami had been telling Chopper a lot of thrilling and interesting things he encountered at sea. Chopper is like a little fanboy, surrounding Nami every day, asking Nami to tell him more and more interesting stories. Because it has been staying here all this time, the most it knows about the outside world is the Seagull newspaper. Apart from that, it understands nothing. But Nami is like a painter, showing it a beautiful, fresh, interesting and colorful sea world. In that world, it heard a lot of fun, exciting and interesting things. Although he is a reindeer, he is also a creature who is interested in the unknown. Finally, with Nami's superb skills of coaxing and deceiving, Chopper was finally persuaded. But persuasion is one thing. When parting, Chopper still cried like a tearful person, holding Dr. Gurva in his arms and crying. After all, this is the place where it has lived for many years, a warm place like home. Dr. Gurva has taken care of him like a mother for many, many years. Now that he is leaving here and leaving Dr. Gurva, he is naturally very reluctant to part with it. Dr. Gulewa touched Chopper's head, like an old mother speaking to her son who was about to travel far away, and said in a gentle tone, "Let's go, I know you will have to leave here sooner or later. You shouldn't let your medical skills be buried here, go to the sea and see the unknown and wonderful world, and don't let your life leave any regrets." In the end, Chopper left with full of reluctance. When they returned to town, Luang was about to take Chopper back to the boat when he suddenly heard a roar coming from behind him. "You fool, stop it quickly. Ha ha ha, I'll pay it next time, I'll pay it again." Accompanied by a burst of hearty laughter, a man wearing a black hat and a black coat ran out of a restaurant with steps that he didn't recognize his relatives. Luang subconsciously turned his head and looked at it, his expression froze involuntarily. How could it be this guy? What he saw before him was none other than his main target after traveling to the world of One Piece. Fire Fist Ace. Fire Fist Ace ran all the way and was scolded all the way, but he still grinned and showed no signs of embarrassment at all. Does this guy also eat overlord meals? Luang felt helpless, and then stopped Ace. "Ace. Brother, here you go." Luang casually took out a 10,000 yuan Bailey and handed it directly to Ace. Although Ace seems a bit unscrupulous when it comes to eating king's meals, his love and protection for his younger brother are beyond words. It can be said that if it weren't for Ace's block, Wang Lufei would really be in trouble. What else will happen to One Piece later? In addition, this guy didn't appear many times in the original plot, but every time he appeared in front of Luffy, the brothers' funny and interesting interactions made many pirate fans find it refreshing and fun. Coupled with Ace's thoughtfulness and tenderness towards his younger brother that he showed from time to time despite his seeming disengagement, many pirates lost their way and became fans. Of course, this is not to say that Ace is very charming, but that Tien is still good at character arrangement and plot coordination. Precisely because Ace doesn't appear many times, Sauda's in-depth portrayal of him is even more memorable. It is so joyful, funny, and interesting, plus Brokan's early character design, that the moment when he was killed by the Red Dog in the battle on the top, it directly made many fans burst into tears, and even shouted that they wanted to give it to someone. Tyoshi Blade. Lu Wang didn't burst into tears, but he was a little unhappy with the plot arrangement of a vicious character like Tien, and he did have a crush on Ace, so he cursed on a whim. He probably scolded him too harshly and was heard by the God of Destiny. So I gave him a chance to change the plot and change the fate of the character. Ace looked surprised, but did not take it immediately, but tipped his hat. He grinned and said, "Good guy, brother, you are so interesting, what is your name?" "Lu Wang. Aruba Lu Wang." Ace nodded. "So you are the bounty hunter in the East China Sea." Very good, but do you know who I am?" Lu Wang glanced at Ace and grinned as well. "Of course I know. Fire Fist Ace, the second captain of the Whitebeard Pirates, is comparable to the great pirate of Shichibukai." Hearing these words, Ace immediately looked on guard and clenched his fist slightly in the dark. "If that's the case, then why did you give me 10,000 Baileys?" At this time, Ace could vaguely feel the powerful energy contained in the ordinary-looking man opposite him. It was an aura as deep as an abyss. Although he is just a new bounty hunter, Lu Wang feels no weaker than himself. Most importantly, this guy is a bounty hunter who is completely hostile to himself. But at this time, Lu Wang was not in the mood to continue talking to him. He knew that now was not the time to reminisce about the past. So without saying a word, he put 10,000 Baileys into Ace's hand, then turned around and said, "Don't chase Blackbeard, or you will cheat yourself." After saying this, Lu Wang left without looking back. Some words are in vain no matter how much you say them. Lu Wang understands Ace's character. He is too stubborn towards Blackbeard and at the same time too confident in his own strength. As a great pirate who can rival Jinbei, Ace is indeed as strong as a monster. The problem is, Blackbeard is much scarier than he imagined. No matter in terms of scheming or strength, Ace is no match. If he continues to be reckless, it will only be counterproductive in the end. However, Lu Wang didn't believe that Ace would change just because of his words. If it was really that simple, then Ace wouldn't be called Ace. Anyway, the God of Destiny will definitely set it according to the plot. Ace will inevitably be plotted by Blackbeard after all, and he will eventually reach the stage of war. After leaving the Ice and Snow Kingdom, Lu Wang and his party quickly set sail again. Coming to this unfamiliar environment, Chopper seemed a little timid towards Vivi and the others. Shanya stretched out his right hand, showing a mouthful of white air, and a rare sunny smile. "Hello, I am Shanya, the cook on this ship. Please give me your advice in the future." Shinolan also stretched out his snow-white and delicate jade hands and looked at Chopper with a smile on his face. "I am Shinolan, a ship repairman and helmsman. Please give me some advice in the future." The attentive and considerate Vivi squatted down, her beautiful big eyes releasing a gentle smile. "Hello, I am Vivi, the Princess of Alabasta, please give me your advice." Chopper looked at Nami and then at everyone. He seemed a little nervous. At this time, Nami touched Chopper's head and said gently, "Don't be afraid, they are all our own people, go ahead and introduce yourself." Chopper glanced at Lu Wang again. His timid appearance was like a small animal asking for its owner's opinion. Lu Wang smiled slightly and said, "It's okay, they will all be your partners from now on, and they will all take care of you like Gu Lewa." After all, this was his first time going to sea, so he would be lying if he said he wasn't nervous or afraid. After hearing the 3 words Gerva, Chopper seemed to have a little more courage. He muttered and looked at the big guy. Then he said in a low voice, My name is Chopper, I am a doctor, please give me more advice from now on." After saying this, Chopper nervously hid behind Nami's feet, as if he was worried that he would be beaten after saying this. Seeing this scene, Luang couldn't help but shake his head, with a hint of emotion in his eyes. He knew why Chopper behaved like this, because this guy became different after accidentally eating a devil fruit when he was a child. The animals all thought he was alien and didn't want to get close to him, let alone play with him. When humans saw him, they thought he was a monster and beat him up in various ways, even chasing him to death. It wasn't until I met an eccentric doctor that I finally found a sense of home. Luang naturally knew the rest of the story in detail. In short, Chopper had always been miserable before he met Gerva. Then Luang quietly told everyone some of Chopper's previous experiences. Only then did they realize that the reason why this little guy was so afraid of people was because he had such a terrible experience. Later, in order to let Chopper break his heart as soon as possible, everyone also started the most enthusiastic mode. He had been hiding next to Nami until Vivi, Shinolin and Luang showed kindness to him, and then he relaxed a little. Shanya smiled and took out a freshly made cake from the cabin and gave it to Chopper. "Try it, this is the Black Forest strawberry cake I made." Chopper leaned against Nami's feet. He looked at the cake and then at Nami, as if he wanted to make sure he could take it. Nami smiled and touched Chopper's head and said, "Eat, it's okay, this is the best chef on our ship, and the food he makes is great." Then Chopper stretched out his hands timidly, took the cake, and whispered, "Thank you." When he picked up the cake and took a bite, his eyes suddenly glowed with stars, and he showed an extremely happy smile. "Wow, so sweet and delicious." Shanya crossed his arms and laughed out loud. "Hey, of course, I am the best chef in the restaurant on the sea. The dim sum I make is second best. No one in this sea dares to say that it is the first." While talking, Shanya pointed at himself with his thumb, looking like a complete stinker. "Luang, why didn't I realize that you have such a stinky side?" Shanya. At this time, Shinolin also walked over with a smile, holding a small windmill that had just been made. "Chopper, this is a small windmill toy I made for you." While talking, Shinolin handed the constantly rotating windmill in front of Chopper. Seeing this constantly rotating thing, Chopper's eyes suddenly lit up. I saw his little hooves covering his mouth, and instantly countless little stars popped up from his eyes. "Wow, it looks amazing." Just like a child seeing a new toy, Chopper became a little excited. But he seemed to have thought of something, and looked at Nami a little timidly, as if asking for her opinion. On this ship, besides Luang, Nami is the person he trusts most now. Nami smiled helplessly and said encouragingly, "Take it, we are a family from today on. It is normal for people to give things to each other, just like Gerva gives you food. Don't be afraid, just accept it boldly." Shinolin also handed the rotating windmill forward with gentle eyes, and said with a smile, "Yes, consider it my meeting gift to you." Chopper looked at Nami anxiously, then at Shinolin, and finally mustered up the courage to take the windmill over. "Wow, it can move, it's so cool." After getting the windmill, Chopper was so happy that his whole face burst into laughter. Seeing this scene, everyone showed a knowing smile. They know that this new friend has officially joined. At this moment, Vivi suddenly shouted, "Look, what beautiful cherry blossoms." Following Vivi's finger, everyone looked in the direction of the Drum Kingdom. On top of the highest snow mountain, there is a patch of pink and beautiful cherry blossoms blooming in the night sky. Seeing this, Chopper, who was playing with a windmill, burst into tears. There was the Dashway Mountain in the Drum Kingdom where his adoptive mother, Gerva, lived. She was using the cannons in the arsenal to turn into fireworks to see her off. Luang patted Chopper on the shoulder. "Watch this cherry blossom feast carefully, we will accompany you to watch it, and then leave after watching it." At this time, everyone tacitly agreed not to say a word, silently accompanying Chopper and this new friend to see the entire beautiful scenery of the blooming cherry blossoms. As if blooming in the sky, the pink, gorgeous, Madara-colored, charming cherry blossoms are constantly flashing in everyone's eyes. This is a miraculous scene and a rare memory. After watching it for a long time, the beautiful cherry blossoms gradually dispersed. Finally, with infinite nostalgia and reluctance, Chopper finally followed Luang and others to leave the Drum Kingdom and the home where he was born and raised. The big ship sets off again. With the addition of Chopper, the atmosphere on the entire ship has become more interesting. As an animal, Chopper can also communicate with the speedster Vivi brought on board, which made everyone feel very interesting. But for Lu Ang, these were just things shown in the original plot, so he didn't put his interest here. He was still lying on his exclusive recliner as comfortably as ever, and continued to read happily. It's another beautiful, cloudless day. After breakfast, Chopper happily ran around on the deck with the windmill, looking very excited. Seeing Chopper having fun like a child, everyone also showed bright smiles. Hey, you can play with a little windmill for so long. What a pitiful life this little guy had when he was a child. For Shinolan, who is a 9th level ship repairman, making a small windmill is easy. After seeing how happy Chopper was playing with a windmill, Shinolan thought about it and decided to find time to make a new toy. He looks like a large ostrich and is as fast as Chopper. He seems to have the same personality as Chopper. He is very happy running around with Chopper. Vivi on the side covered her mouth and smiled from ear to ear. Nami, Shanya and Shinolan quickly got into the rhythm of special training. By now, Shinolan has reached a strength of 800 pounds. This kind of power can probably beat an adult man into a meat pie with one punch, and can even kill a cow with one punch. Shanya's strength has increased to 900 pounds, and it won't be long before he can break through the 1,000-pound level. Once it reaches 1,000 pounds, it is 10 times the strength of an adult. By this time, the power of Shanya's kicking skills will definitely reach a new level. Although Yamaga's current power is far less than that of Sanji, he is still very young. Judging from his potential, it will definitely be easy to surpass Sanji. Hearing Chopper's excited shouts and noisy running, Lu Ang didn't feel any discomfort. On the contrary, it has a lively feeling. After all, the people on this ship are all adults. The arrival of Chopper, who has a childlike personality, just adds a little liveliness to the big guys. Lu Ang, who had seen half of the situation, stretched slightly and turned his head slightly to one side, just in time to see Vivi feeding the radish from the side. Today Vivi is wearing a blue dress and looks particularly elegant and beautiful. But because some parts are relatively large, I still have to hold up the clothes at the front. Through the side, Lu Ang inadvertently looked at an indescribable scene, and his old face turned red instantly. Did I see something I shouldn't have seen? Without saying anything, Lu Ang quickly buried his face in the book, then slowly lay down, pretending not to notice anything. But not long after, he felt his nose was warm, and when he touched it with his hand, it actually started to bleed. Without thinking, he immediately shouted, "Chopper, Chopper!" Chopper, who was playing with the windmill, was stunned for a moment, then turned around and found that Lu Ang's whole hand was covered in blood. "Ah, Captain, why are you bleeding? Wait a minute, don't move, I'll get medical supplies." Chopper was startled at first, and then immediately ran towards the cabin very quickly. When everyone heard this, they rushed over immediately. As a result, Lu Ang, who was lying on the recliner, saw several large-scale things floating in front of his eyes. Looking at the pink and white patches of snow, his nosebleeds instantly increased and started to flow out again. This is so terrible, everyone didn't know why, they just kept feeling poor and nervous. "Captain, did you eat something bad? How could this be? You don't have a fever. Could it be that you ate something that made you angry?" Although no one could explain the reason, this anxious and caring gesture still made Lu Ang somewhat warm. "I know how to feel sorry for you at the critical moment. Not bad, not bad. Fortunately, my love for you is not in vain." Lu Ang subconsciously avoided those surging breaths while secretly feeling relieved. Soon, Chopper trotted over with a wet towel and some hemostatic swabs. After applying a cold towel to the bridge of his nose, Chalba carefully stuffed the cotton swab into Lu Ang's nostril. It didn't take long for the nosebleed to stop. Seeing this, everyone gave Chopper a thumbs up. "Nami, Chopper, you are so great. You are indeed the best doctor in the Drum Kingdom." Shanya gave a thumbs up. "Awesome. Shinolan, it's really great, it was done in one go." Vivi nodded. As expected of a doctor, his hands and feet were so quick that he stopped the bleeding in the blink of an eye. Lu Ang also gave a thumbs up to Chopper. "Well done, Chopper." It was the first time that so many people praised him at the same time. Chopper couldn't help but be stunned. But then he waved his hooves and said coyly, "I hate it. Don't think that I will be happy if you say that. I am not happy at all, not happy at all. Poof. Everyone couldn't help laughing when they saw this. What the hell do you call unhappy? The only thing you missed was that you didn't have wings on your back, so you just went to heaven happily. After this incident, everyone knew that Chopper was a child who was easily shy and easily carried away. Leisurely days always make it easy for people to forget the passage of time. Before you know it, another week has passed. With Chopper, life on the ship became much more interesting, and there were many times more laughter every day than before. After all, in the past, everyone focused on doing their own things more often, so they could only get together during meals. Now with Chopper, everyone can easily be stuck on a happy thread, and Chopper will make them lively from time to time. At noon that day, Luang, who had just finished lunch, came to the bow of the ship. He habitually blew in the cool sea breeze and breathed himself. After all, the air in the cabin is still slightly worse. At this moment, Luang suddenly saw a man struggling crazily not far away, and then he was swallowed by the sea water. Just when he was thinking about whether to go and rescue him, a vigorous figure suddenly jumped from the deck like a dragon. Shinolin. The one who jumped down just now was Shinolin. Obviously, she also noticed it, so she jumped down immediately. Not long after, Shinolin pulled a man to the surface. Sir, throw down the rope quickly. After hearing Shinolin's cry, Luang was stunned for a moment, then without saying anything he quickly found a rope and threw it down. Soon, with the help of Luang, Shinolin successfully rescued the man in his hand. When he saw this man's face, Luang was speechless. This guy is none other than the number 2 cadre of Baroque Studio, Mr. 2. Luang, who is from the Appearance Association, is not interested in this guy at all, even though he was once benevolent to the protagonist group. But, for Luang, this kind of shemale is the existence that he has the most indifference to. And, the most important thing is that this time the ladyboy got the order from the boss crocodile to clear out all the pirates who get close. It's just that this guy was too anxious and rushed over in a hurry when he saw the ship. As a result, his boat accidentally capsized and he fell into the sea water. As a person with the ability to imitate devil fruit, he has naturally been cast aside by the sea, and of course he was drowned by the sea water without any suspense. Luang glanced at this guy and said casually, "Throw him down." This guy also has a bounty, but he is also the only one who Luang doesn't want to exchange for the bounty. Because he is a shemale. He is not as big-hearted as the protagonist and wants to make all kinds of friends. Hearing what Luang said, Shinolin was frightened on the spot. Luang glanced at Feng Clay and said to Shinolin, "Do you know who he is?" Looking at this guy with a strange appearance and strange clothes, Shinolin shook his head and had no idea. She just happened to see it and couldn't bear it, so she jumped down to save people. She didn't think much at that moment. Luang said, "This guy is the number 2 cadre of Baroque Studio, called Mr. 2. Now on the entire ship, except for me, none of you are his opponent. Keeping him will only be a disaster." Quote. At this time, Vivi also came out. When he heard what Luang said, he immediately walked over with a solemn expression. "This person, I don't seem to have seen him before. Captain, are you sure he is the officer?" Luang glanced at Vivi. She was wearing a bit more conservatively today. Wearing a long cardigan and snow-white trousers, her figure is still slender and slim. With a big blue ponytail, she looks very refreshing and cute. He said, "What I know about him is not much different from what I know about you, what do you think?" And, speaking of this, Luang sneered, "This guy eats the imitation devil fruit, and he can turn into the appearance of anyone he touches." What? Vivi covered her mouth and suddenly remembered something. Could it be that the previous riots are all related to this guy? Seeing Vivi's stunned eyes, Luang knew what this guy should have guessed. "Throw it down. When this guy wakes up, I'll have to work hard again." Luang walked towards Feng Clay as he spoke, preparing to throw him down personally. At this moment, Feng Clay suddenly spat out a few mouthfuls of sea water. Ahem, cough, 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 am I not dead? Looking at his hands and then at everything in front of him, he seemed to remember what happened. Obviously, he was rescued at the last moment, and the person who saved him was none other than the person from this ship. After hearing Luang say that this guy was the number 2 cadre of Baroque Studio, and seeing Feng Clay wake up, everyone couldn't help but take a few steps back. Everyone looked wary and looked at Feng Clay with great vigilance. The two sides looked at each other, and then Feng Clay made an unusual move. He stood up slowly, and then bowed deeply to everyone without saying a word. Thank you for saving my life. Seeing this, everyone looked at each other and then breathed a sigh of relief. It seems that the cadres of this Baroque studio are not so unreasonable, cold-blooded and ruthless people. Luang, you're welcome, you can get out now. Everyone was dumbfounded when they heard Luang's sudden words. Is this captain so ruthless? Isn't it too cruel to throw someone down again after they finally escaped death? But Luang had made up his mind, and no one dared to say anything more. At this time, Feng Clay couldn't help rubbing his hands and smiled. Then, can you give me a small boat? My boat has capsized when it came. I will continue like this, you will be drowned by the sea water. After hearing this, Shinolin couldn't help but feel soft in his heart. She bit her red lips lightly and looked at Luang with pleading eyes. Sir, can we give him a boat? Hearing Shinolin's words, Luang was speechless. Didn't you guys hear what you just said? Is this guy our enemy? Why are you so nice to your enemies? Besides, this guy is a friend of the previous protagonist, not mine, so why should I care about his life or death? Nami gritted his teeth and said, Captain, how about we give him a boat? Luang remained silent, but looked at Vivi and said, Vivi, let me say it again, this guy is the second cadre of Baroque Studio, and he once played the role of your father, Alabasta's foreign swindler, caused public dissatisfaction and riots. It can be said that a considerable part of the riots in your country were caused by this weird man. What do you want me to do? After hearing this, Vivi immediately looked at Feng Clay with hatred. If it were someone else, Vivi might still have a sense of pity and sympathy. But towards the sinners who have harmed thousands of people in the entire Alabasta kingdom, she only has overwhelming resentment and rage in her heart. Vivi pointed at Feng Clay and shouted, I'm going to throw him down and feed him to the fish. Luang. Okay. The next second, he walked towards Feng Clay. Feng Clay never expected such a scene, and his face turned pale with fright. When Luang approached him, he gritted his teeth, jumped up suddenly, and jumped directly to the mast. Standing on the mast, Feng Clay said condescendingly, I'm sorry, I can't die in your hands in vain. No matter what, I have the right to survive. I agree with your opinion. Luang nodded and slowly pulled out the second-generation ghost in his hand. In an instant, the air temperature dropped sharply. However, I still have no intention of letting you go. What's going on? Why did it suddenly become so cold? Feeling the sudden cooling of the air, Feng Clay couldn't help but hug his arms tightly, and his whole body began to tremble uncontrollably. I only use one sword. If you are alive after the sword has passed, I will give you a boat, but if you can't catch it. Speaking of this, Luang completely pulled out the second-generation ghost. He pointed the tip of second-generation Kidetsu's sword at Feng Clay and continued, that's your life. Feng Clay swallowed his saliva. At this moment, he suddenly found that the Luang in front of him seemed familiar, as if he had seen him somewhere. Looking at his face, and then at the opponent's sword, Feng Clay suddenly had an idea flash in his mind, and shouted loudly, wait a minute, you are the super newcomer from the East China Sea, who has hunted 5 people. The star bounty hunter of the millionaire pirate killer Luca, Aruba Luang. Luang. He glanced at Feng Clay and said slowly, yes, so. You should be mentally prepared. After saying this, Luang tightened his grip on second-generation Gute without saying a word. After all, he promised Vivi that he would deal with Crocodile and save her country, so naturally he meant it. At this moment, Nami suddenly said, Captain, does this guy have a bounty? Luang was stunned for a moment, then thought about it, nodded and said, yes, I remember it was 32 million. Upon hearing this, Nami's eyes suddenly lit up, and Pele's symbol almost directly occupied her beautiful big eyes. She excitedly held her pink fist and gasped, this is a huge sum of money. Captain, instead of killing him, wouldn't it be better to give him to Marine? At this time, in her eyes, Feng Clay was no longer a human being, but a Bailey number of 32 million. Hearing Nami's words, Luang couldn't help pinching his chin. He looked at the human demon Feng Clay in front of him, and suddenly felt that this guy didn't seem so ugly. Although I am a beauty person, catching bad guys should not have anything to do with my appearance. After all, I am a bounty hunter, not a flower thief, so everything must be based on reality. Feng Clay was standing on the mast at this time, swallowing his saliva, and looking at the ghost sword exuding cold murderous intent with some trembling. Although his own strength is not bad, compared to the murderer Luca back then, he is definitely a weakling. You know, in the old days, the gold content represented by the bounty was much stronger than it is now. What was 50 million Baileys at that time could easily be worth over 100 million Baileys now. In other words, Lu Ang can kill a big pirate worth hundreds of millions of dollars. With such strength, isn't it very simple to kill yourself? Just when Feng Clay was struggling with what to do, the ship from the Baroque studio suddenly appeared from a distance and approached here at an extremely fast speed. Ha ha ha, my people have come to pick me up, so I won't accompany you anymore. Seeing that the ship was coming soon, Feng Clay couldn't help but smile proudly and even danced like a she-male. Lu Ang actually doesn't dislike this guy's behavior at all, he even admires it. Because at the last moment, he stopped Marine for the protagonist group, and was caught by Marine because of this. For this reason, even if he is a she-male, he can definitely be regarded as a man who dares to hurt his friends. It's a pity that I am not Luffy, let alone his friend. Now that we have met, and since our positions are different, then, we have to draw our swords and confront each other. Lu Ang looked indifferent, and without saying a word, he swung his sword towards Feng Clay. Howling Wolf. In an instant, a white rice blood wolf that shocked the world and cried ghosts and gods suddenly burst out of the air and attacked Feng Clay angrily. The blood wolf transformed by the terrifying sword energy exudes extremely terrifying killing intent, like a devil devouring all things. In an instant, Feng Clay was frightened, his heart was pounding with fear, and his scalp was numb. The moment he saw the blood wolf, Feng Clay knew that he had no chance of winning. Without thinking, he tried his best to escape from this critical moment. However, he found that his body seemed to be fixed and could not move at all. Oh God, don't! Feng Clay let out a shocking scream, and then his whole body was hit by the blood wolf and flew into the sky. With countless blood rising into the sky, Feng Clay flew high into the clouds and then quickly fell down. Boom! There was a loud noise that resounded in all directions, and the entire ship was shaken slightly by Feng Clay's body. Fortunately, the deck was relatively thick, so it was not directly smashed through by Feng Clay, but there was still a trace of cracks. Seeing Feng Clay, who was covered in scars and almost dying, everyone took a breath. At a glance, Feng Clay had no less than 100 sharp wounds on his body. In other words, at that moment, he suffered no fewer than 100 sword cuts. Lu Ang, Chaoba, simply treat his wound and try to give him a breath of relief. This time, Feng Clay was able to escape death not because of his good luck, nor because of his physical strength. It was because Lu Ang put away 9 points of his strength at the last moment. This is a fatal blow from one of the strongest swordsmen in the world. Even Hawkeye has to deal with it seriously, let alone this useless Feng Clay. If he hadn't put away 9 points of his strength, even if he had only used 2 points of his strength, Lu Ang believed that this demon would have narrowly escaped death. Seeing Feng Clay's injury, Chopper couldn't help but shake his head. This injury is too serious. But as a doctor, Chopper didn't just attack this guy just because he was an enemy. Instead, he seriously went to the cabin to get various emergency hemostatic drugs and medical supplies, and began to treat Feng Clay. At the same time, one of the ships from Baroque Studio also approached. Hey, where are you from? Tell me your name. Soon, a burly man wearing a yellow cloak stood on a large ship and shouted to everyone in Lu Ang. At this moment, a sharp-eyed man with yellow hair spotted Feng Clay and quickly pushed the big man. Wait a minute, boss, look over there. That person seems to be Mr. 2. Upon hearing this, the big man immediately became wary. Without saying a word, he took out a musket and pointed it at Lu Ang. Who are you and why are you attacking our Mr. 2? Raise your hands quickly or I won't be polite. Seeing that the other party had taken out his muskets, Lu Ang's expression turned cold, and his eyes suddenly narrowed without even saying a word. Conqueror's dominance blooms instantly. Before these two people had time to react, their minds went blank in the blink of an eye. The two of them felt their eyes go dark and fainted immediately. Seeing that these two people were killed by Luang in a blink of an eye, everyone did not react much, and in a blink of an eye they started doing their own work. Luang is a super powerful being who can even kill warships with one sword. It is effortless to deal with such a passerby. Alabasta has arrived. At this moment, Vivi suddenly let out a cry of surprise. Then everyone looked towards the sea, and sure enough, an endless desert town appeared not far ahead. Thinking of the story of the desert adventure that was previously revealed in the original plot, Luang couldn't help but show a look of anticipation. Just like in the Virgin Forest, there are also many interesting monsters in the desert here. Of course, this was interesting only to him. For Vivi, Nami and others who have no power to restrain themselves, it is a terrifying place. Soon, everyone pulled the boat up. By the way, is there a marine base here? When he was about to get off the boat, Luang suddenly said to Vivi. Because there are still 4 bounty criminals in the cabin, Luang is going to quickly find a marine base to exchange these guys for bounty money. FF equals. Vivi nodded. Yes, there is, but it's not here, we have to take a detour. Hearing this, Luang couldn't help but feel helpless. He knew that it would take at least half a month to walk from here to the kingdom. During this half month, they can be completely self-sufficient, but it would be very cumbersome to carry 4 towing oil bottles in the boat. Luang patted the back of his head and sighed, it's really troublesome. Nami also saw Luang's headache and couldn't help but said, how about you, Captain, bring these guys with you. At this moment, Luang suddenly thought of something and couldn't help but glance at everyone and said, by the way, you guys said, if you accidentally kill a criminal and take the body to Marine to collect the bounty, will they give it to you? Everyone. Hearing this, everyone suddenly looked at Luang with a strange expression. Could it be that the captain is planning to kill these people before setting off? Luang knew that everyone had misunderstood him, so he waved his hands quickly and said, ahem, don't be like this, that's what I said. After all, you have to carry 4 tow bottles on the road, which is very stressful. I'm just worried about not being careful. Kill these guys, and if you can't exchange for the bounty, it will be worth the loss. At this time, Vivi suddenly covered her mouth as if thinking. After a moment, she slowly raised her beautiful head and said, according to my understanding, it should be possible. Luang nodded. Okay, if that's the case, then take them decisively. He just did what he said. Luang didn't show any sloppiness at all and walked into the cabin without saying a word. It didn't take long for him to catch 4 bounty criminals. His physical strength is hundreds of times that of ordinary people, so it is not easy to catch these guys. Holding them was like holding a little mouse. To Luang, it was nothing. Seeing Luang holding 2 in one hand, everyone gave a thumbs up in unison. In the end, Shanya felt that as a man, he had to share the burden, so he carried the thinnest golden week. In order to make it easier for them to walk, Luang loosened the ropes tied to these guys' feet. He didn't have that much free time to carry these guys around, especially the bulkiest, fattest, and most insignificant Valpo. Because Luang had kept his hands before, even though Feng Clay's injury seemed serious, it was actually just a flesh wound. There was a lot of blood, but the actual injury was not as serious as imagined. Therefore, after Chopper's blood, Feng Clay, who had taken care of his wounds and tied them with various bandages, could still force himself to move. It's just that he was tied up like a mummy, which looked a little strange. After paying some parking fees for the boat, Luang quickly came to this town with everyone. Vivi said, it's better to buy some suitable clothes and sun protection products here. In this desert country, the sun exposure is very terrible. If you don't apply sunscreen well, you won't get to the kingdom by then. I'm afraid everyone's skin will be damaged, dried by the sun. Luang is not cold about this, and now he is completely fearless of the cold and heat. He could feel that his physical body had reached a rather terrifying state, although he had not yet experimented with what extent it had reached. But judging from the incident in the Drum Kingdom, he had a vague feeling that he was no longer an ordinary person. Luang, you go on your own, I'll wait here. Nami and others also knew that Luang didn't like shopping, so they went together happily without forcing themselves. Lu Ang and Shanya then guarded 4 people to reward criminals, and found an abandoned earthen house to hide from the sun. At this time, Feng Clay and Mr. 3 were also staring at each other, wondering why the other party was arrested. But soon, they started mocking each other. Mr. 3. Don't you know some bullshit shemale boxing skills? Why were you arrested? Feng Clay glanced at Mr. 3 with disdain. Humph, are you embarrassed to talk to me? You were caught. Mr. 3. Glancing at Feng Clay, Mr. 3 frowned slightly. However, you were beaten worse than me. My injuries were not as serious as yours. Look at you, haha, what a dog you have been beaten into. It's a shame that your ranking is higher than mine, it turns out it's nothing more than that. Hearing this, Feng Clay became angry. You are not convinced, are you? If not, let's have a fight. As 2 senior cadres of the Baroque studio, they had disliked each other a long time ago. At this time, after a sneer, he actually wanted to do it again. Lu Ang glanced at the 2 of them casually and said boredly, okay, you guys weigh half a caddy or 8 taels each, you are no match for me. What's there to argue about? Just calm down for lousy and sit down obediently. If anyone tries to bully me again, I will kill him with 1 strike of my sword. Hearing this, both of them couldn't help but shudder. Especially Feng Clay, he had personally tried the power of that terrifying swordsmanship. 1 sword, just 1 sword almost cut him into 10,000 pieces. He can be sure that Lu Ang held back in the end, otherwise he would definitely die in a miserable way. After looking at these 4 guys, Lu Ang suddenly shook his head and let out a long sigh. Hey, it would be great if this was the Marine base. Although the bounties for these 4 criminals are not high, they add up to a considerable amount of wealth. Lu Ang couldn't help but feel helpless when he thought that he would have to continue walking a long way with them. At this moment, a burst of noise suddenly came from a distance. Chase, hurry up and chase there. Guys, please keep up, the pirates are just ahead. The Straw Hat Pirates have been discovered. Lu Ang's eyes lit up when he heard the key words in this noisy voice. Hey guys, is this Marine chasing Luffy Wong? Without saying a word, he stood up immediately. Then, Lu Ang saw countless Marines holding muskets and quickly chasing them from the opposite street. Don't do anything, Straw Hat Boy, let me handle it. As a deep sound fell, a burst of smoke rushed up from behind and entered another street at an extremely fast speed. It's Smoker. Hey, now I have my bounty. Seeing Smoker disappear in a blink of an eye, Lu Ang immediately kicked the butts of several people. Get up, it's time to hit the road. Feng Clay and the other 3 were kicked for a while and grinned, but they didn't dare to have any opinions. Lu Ang is too cruel, too domineering, too arrogant, and too cold. He would draw his sword whenever he disagreed, and his swordsmanship was so terrifying that no one wanted to use their own body to experience how powerful his swordsmanship was. Shanya pushed the thin golden weak and chased ahead with Lu Ang. Halfway through, Lu Ang suddenly thought of something and couldn't help but stop. He pinched his chin and suddenly thought that Feng Clay changed into his appearance because he touched Alabasta's body. After that, he went around committing suicide, causing all kinds of public resentment, and finally led to riots again and again. The rebels were also provoked to launch an armed uprising against the kingdom. But no one knows that behind all this is Crocodile, who is Shichibukai. Everyone in the entire country, from the king to the common people, were all played around by Crocodile. So, thinking of this, Lu Ang decided not to hand this guy over to Marine yet. This is his ambition to completely overthrow Crocodile and a big key to saving this country. After settling his mind, Lu Ang pulled Feng Clay to the other side, and then pushed the other 3 people to quickly walk in the direction of Marine. In another alley, Luffy was running like crazy. Behind him, Smoker turned into white smoke and chased after him. Just when Smoker was about to catch Luffy, a burst of flames fell from the sky and violently dispersed his smoke. Hey, don't move, this guy is my brother. With a proud smile, a half-naked, short-haired man wearing a hat and leather shorts appeared in front of everyone. The man was wrapped in fire, with a confident and high-spirited smile on his face, and he looked a little domineering. He is none other than Fire Fist Ace. The moment he saw Ace, Smoker's face darkened. It's actually you. Ace raised his dome hat with his hand and said with a smile, I think you should not waste your efforts. Smoke and fire are both Logia's devil fruits. If the two of us fight, we will never be able to tell the winner. Of. Seeing Ace appear, Luffy was very excited and immediately shouted, "Ace!" Ace turned his head and glanced at Luffy with a smile. "Long time no see, Luffy." Seeing these two people talking so freely in front of him, Smoker was furious. Without saying a word, he turned his hands into two balls of white smoke again. "Ha, don't be too arrogant." With a roar, Smoker immediately rushed forward. After seeing Smoker rushing up, Ace said to Luffy, "Luffy, you go first, wait until I finish this guy, and I will follow him later." Luffy nodded. "Okay." Then, without saying a word, he turned around and ran away with his companions. Obviously, he still trusts his elder brother. Soon, the smoke and fire started to dry up. As Ace said, this confrontation was destined to be fruitless from the beginning. The two of them knocked all the way from the ground to the sky, and then from the sky to the ground. I don't know how long I have been doing it, but Luang is watching the show from the side. Looking at the scene of fireworks exploding in midair, he was extremely happy. "Hey, it's a pity that I didn't buy some melon seeds, otherwise I could have been a happy melon eater." Shanya. Speechless, it was the first time for Shanya to see two types of Logia's devil fruits fighting so fiercely. That scene was simply much cooler than watching fireworks. It was like a volcano flying into the clouds, exploding and erupting in the sky. There was a rumbling sound, shaking in all directions. The battle between smoke and fire lasted for almost half an hour before it disappeared. Not long after the rumbling sound disappeared, Luang saw Smoker coming back with a livid face. Obviously, he didn't win Fire Fist Ace. This result is obvious. After all, Ace can compete with Shichibukai, a big pirate with a bounty of 500 million. If you can defeat him easily, then his title of Fire Fist is too watery. Of course, if Luang is willing, it won't be a waste of effort to defeat Ace. With 3 colors of domineering in hand, coupled with top-notch swordsmanship and physical skills, it would not be a waste of effort to press Ace to the ground and rub him. But this kind of thing is just a comparison based on basic strength. It is never possible for the two of them to fight. Because Ace was originally a character that Luang admired, and he came here to change Ace's fate. How could he kill a character he admired? After seeing Smoker come back, all the marine subordinates looked at each other and didn't dare to ask a word. Anyone who is not a fool knows that Smoker did not take any advantage in this confrontation. Moreover, he also lost the Straw Hat Pirates. The result of this failure must have made him furious and unhappy. Smoker is now a walking barrel of explosives. He will blow up anyone who dares to mess with him. But Smoker, whom everyone fears, is actually a big benefactor in Luang's eyes at this moment. He grinned and went forward without saying a word. "Hi, Colonel Smoker, who is as handsome as me, long time no see." Smoker, who was already full of anger and unhappy, became even more furious when he saw Luang. He was snorting air from his nostrils, his eyes were widened, he crossed his arms over his chest, and said with a dark face, "What's the matter?" At this moment, Dasky also ran over panting. "Colonel Smoker, how are you? Did you catch Straw Hat Luffy?" At this time, Luang also glanced at Dasky, his eyes inadvertently glanced at the white patch of snow on the opposite side, and he shook his head subconsciously. "Nami is a little older." Smoker. "HMPH, no, I was blocked by Fire Fist Ace, and I failed in the end." At this time, Smoker walked around Luang and saw a few guys with their hands tied around him, and couldn't help but frown slightly. Dasky, who knew Smoker, was naturally keenly aware of his eyes, and then looked at the people around Luang. Dasky covered her mouth with a look of disbelief. These people are all bounty criminals. As Marine's captain and Smoker's little assistant, Dasky already has a very thorough understanding of all the pirates with bounties released by Marine. Therefore, she recognized Miss Golden Week, Valpo and Mr. 3 at just one glance, as they were the pirate criminals who were being rewarded by the Marine headquarters. Seeing this, without Luang having to say anything, Smoker knew the other party's intention. Luang glanced at Dasky and raised his lips slightly. "Miss Dasky really has good eyesight. These 3 people are indeed the criminals I caught. I want to hand them over to you now, is that okay?" Dasky's eyes showed a hint of embarrassment. Yes, but we are currently out to arrest criminals." We don't have so much cash with us, so we may not be able to cash it for you right away. Hearing this, Luang waved his hand and said, it's okay, it's okay. You guys can report it for me first. Next time I pass by other marine bases, just remember to settle the account for me. Upon hearing this, Smoker couldn't help but soften his expression, because the meaning of Luang's words was very clear, that is, I want to believe you. I can hand over these 3 criminals to you first, and then go to other marine bases to get my bounty back. Although they have met several times, Luang's way of speaking still makes Smoker feel very comfortable. After all, not everyone everywhere likes and trusts Marine and trusts the world government. Luang's ability to say these words still made Smoker feel very comfortable. Smoker thought for a while and said, okay, I guarantee with my personality that you will never lose a penny of this bounty. Hearing this, Luang suddenly smiled and said, of course I have great trust in Colonel Smoker's character. With your words, I naturally feel more at ease. After saying this, Luang pushed the 3 people over. At this moment, the wretched and insidious Mr. 3 suddenly looked at Feng Clay, who was wrapped as a mummy, and said with an evil smile, there is also this guy, he is also a pirate, his name is Feng Clay, why don't you Marines put him together? Bring him to justice. Because Feng Clay had been wrapped in bandages countless times by Chopper, he looked like a mummy, and it was impossible to tell whether it was a human or a dog inside. If no one spoke up, it would be impossible for anyone to know that the mummified guy was Feng Clay. Luang originally planned to take Feng Clay back to the palace and deal with Crocodile while also solving the rebellion in the palace. But he never thought that Mr. 3, a villain, would sell out his former teammates at a critical moment. It was very insidious, and the identity of Feng Clay was revealed in an instant with just one word from a very small person. After hearing these words, Luang's expression changed instantly. Your sister, dogs are not humans, but you are a real dog. If he had known that this guy could be so insidious that he would not spare his own people, he would have simply slapped him to death. Smoker looked at Luang with a gloomy face and said in a deep voice, Luang, tell me, what do you mean? Luang let out a sigh of relief. Even if he wanted to hide it now, he probably couldn't. Then he shook his head and told everything that Vivi had entrusted him with. Of course, it is impossible for Luang to talk about the 1 billion belly thing. In front of outsiders, you have to create a glorious and perfect image of yourself no matter what. After listening to Luang's words, Smoker and Dasky looked at each other. Both of them had a look of suspicion in their eyes. They looked at Luang strangely, wondering why they felt something was wrong. Because, based on their understanding of Luang, this guy is just a big money addict who has no profit and can't afford to start early. This can be seen from the fact that he has to count the bounties several times after getting them. It is simply unbelievable that such a person would selflessly help a princess of a kingdom to save the country. Smoker glanced at Dasky and said, how do you think this guy's words are credible? Dasky looked at Luang for a long time. At this moment, she suddenly remembered that not long ago, Luang came to Marine and made a big fuss about Shui Hua. Before, she once felt that Luang was unreasonable and a bit arrogant, but after Shui Hua informed her, she realized that Luang was sympathetic to her life experience and current situation, and wanted to take her out of the sea of suffering. The reason why he did not take her on the boat was because Luang felt that his journey was too dangerous and he was worried that he would not be able to protect Shui Hua. No matter how you say it, a man with such compassion cannot be a bad person with too much ambition and conspiracy. Thinking of this, Dasky said, Colonel Smoker, I think, his words are 70% credible. 7 points. After hearing Dasky's words, Smoker also fell into deep thought. He had to admit that Luang had always been well received since he met him. Wherever he went, there was no village or town that had been bullied by pirates that was not grateful to him. In other words, he is not a simple bounty hunter, but an upright bounty hunter who does not do any evil things. After careful consideration, Smoker finally raised his head, stared at Luang solemnly and said, I will believe you for once, but only this time. After you help put down the rebellion again, you must send this guy to me immediately. The nearest marine base, understand? If someone else had said this to him in such an almost commanding tone, Luang would have definitely done it without saying a word. But Smoker is a Marine with a strong sense of justice, and Luang is still willing to give him some face. Luang grinned. Of course, no problem. After all, this guy is quite valuable. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.